Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Crucible. I am Zen Shapiro, as you all know, in-house right-wing debater on the Crucible, filling in as the moderator tonight for the debate we've got in store with BPF, also known as Andrew Wilson, and Jim Bob. They're going to be taking on Savaya and Spirit Man on the topic of lunatics on the internet. And frankly, if I'm being honest, guys, I don't know what that means. I don't know what is going to happen in this debate. All I know is that we are going to hear some lunatics on the internet speaking, and you guys be the judge of who that is. Before we continue, just a quick announcement. Tomorrow night, we do have a debate scheduled at the same time between myself and Kale on the topic of, is abortion justified by Christian ethics? And we were going to do a trash talk promo on that, but Kale never sent one in. So I'll just do a quick 30-second dissertation of my own before we continue. This guy's a fucking lunatic on the internet if he thinks he's going to be able to justify abortion through the lens of Christianity without bastardizing everything about the faith and creating a new religion. So my prediction is that he's going to get destroyed in about 15 minutes and thrown the fuck off stream. So that's my trash talk for that debate. That's my promo. Before we bring our debaters out, I just want to remind everybody, please like, share, subscribe. It really helps the channel with the algorithm on YouTube, helps us spread the message of the best political debate content on the internet here at the Crucible, far and wide. So also, if you want to show support, you can do so by sending in super chats and by becoming a channel member. That really helps us out. So if you've got questions for the debaters, or you just want to talk shit at the end, you want to say BPF's a degenerate chain smoker, or that Jim Bob's got scrawny shoulders, you can do that. And so super chats will take priority. All that being said, we will be right back with our debaters. And we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got our debaters, Jim Bob and Andrew on the right, Savaya and Spirit Man on the left. Those of you that are new to the channel, the structure of the debate is going to be 5 to 7 minute opening statements. Okay, 7-minute limit opening statements for each side, and roughly an hour and a half of cross-examination and open discussion. At that point, we'll go to moderator questions and audience Q&A through super chats if there are any. And we discussed backstage. Everybody's been debriefed. The right side is going to go first. Andrew, nobody knows who the fuck you are, so why don't you tell us all about yourself, where we can find you, and then lead into your opening statement with that.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Wilson, owner of the Crucible. I was happy these gentlemen reached out. We always enjoy talking to people from all walks of life and either shitting on their worldview or affirming it or having ours destroyed. I know Jim Bob's in the same boat. He enjoys doing the exact same thing. So I asked him if he would come and partner with me on this debate, and he graciously said yes. You can find me right here on the Crucible, either doing social commentary or debates. Thanks for letting me shout myself out.
Okay, and you can just lead into your opening statement with that.
You want to let everybody else shout themselves
out?
Okay,
yeah, Yeah, okay. Jim Bob, go ahead. Shout yourself out.
Made by Jim Bob. People call me Jim Bob. I'm a political cartoonist, and so I cover all sorts of cultural views and worldviews and things like that through cartooning. And this is another way to express that interest. And so I'm here tonight to hear a variety of assertions and see what happens. Made by JimBob.com.
Okay, Savaya, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and shout yourself out?
Hello, I am Savaya, or also known as Gabriel. I am a mystical synthesist, person that takes ideological, historic paradigms that are more marginalized, or maybe just outright not considered a realistic area of expertise. And so I try to find the underlying currents behind polarization battles, reoccurring conflicts that come up between common rhetoric, and see if there can be another line of understanding, common ground that may not be in the center, as some people might seem. So
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't know. This is just a moment to shout yourself out and tell people where they can find you. We'll get to the opening statements after.
Okay, so
just making sure.
On Twitch, yeah, it's a bit of a long response. Yeah, I know. People can find me on Twitch TV /Savaya21, and that's it.
Okay, Spirit Man, last but not least.
Thank you so much for having me on, gentlemen. I'm Mark, actually, and if you guys want to find me, I'm actually what you call a genuine philosopher, and I'm sharing this kind of wisdom, this new type of wisdom, in 3 different groups. So if you'd like to find me on the cultural stuff, the stuff about not having enough wisdom between religion and science, all these cultural paradigms, you can go to Hegelians who want to change the world on Facebook. Or if you're more interested in labor and wealth inequality, you can find us at the Worldwide Essential Workers app, or WEWA, on Facebook. And if you're more interested in healthcare, then you can find us on the Facebook group called CRISPR, the Elixir of Life. And hopefully in this debate, maybe we'll cover all of those or one of them. But I'm very interested to see where this all goes. And I really appreciate you guys for having us on.
Yeah, and we appreciate everybody coming.
Just real quick, Spirit Man, can you turn your mic down just a bit? You're peaking just a bit in my ear.
I'm not sure how to do that, but let me try
if you go to the settings at the bottom, that scroll bar, you can go to audio, and then there should be a mic volume bar.
Okay.
And then just give me a test 1, 2, 3.
It doesn't give me an audio bar, actually. But does that help? I did turn it down a bit on my computer.
Yeah, it sounds better. You might want to turn yourself up a little.
Just a little bit up, yeah, because you're a little quiet now.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So yeah, like we said earlier, each debater is going to get 7 minutes for an opening statement, and then there's going to be roughly an hour and a half of cross-examination period. At that point, we get into Q&A and closing statements.
And there's callers as well.
And callers. So yeah, I forgot to mention, if anybody wants to call in to ask a question to any of the debaters, you can get the Discord link from the chat, get vetted by the mods. They will give you a link. You can call into the show and ask your questions. Also, super chats will take priority as always, and so we appreciate all of that. And Andrew and Jim Bob have agreed to go first, so 7 minutes whenever you start talking.
Yeah, Jim Bob, would you humor me and let me go first?
Absolutely.
Okay, before I do, I just wanted to make sure that I told Ben Thorpe over here, resident Crucible troll, that the reason that I'm extending these gentlemen so much courtesy is because they reached out in the correct way and were very courteous back and didn't annoy me to death, which you're already doing. And I'm certain that a mod's going to time you out right this second because I don't like your face. Timed out 5 minutes. Now, to my opening statement. I did some research into what mystical synthesism is, as Savaya likes to call himself, a mystical synthesis. As I was unfamiliar with this term, When I saw what it was, I knew instantly it was a repackaged label of something we all commonly can refer to as just a mystic, essentially. So what do mystics believe? Well, who the hell knows? Their mysticism is generally cloaked in mystical language that is designed to sound very enlightened, but ultimately comes up short when it comes to any actual effects. Spiritual cooking, for instance, or the art of taking a woman's period blood and mixing it with a man's semen, spreading it on food and eating it would be a form of mysticism. To be more charitable, perhaps, and helping to explore your spiritual journey might be the most charitable way I can frame it. That would be another form of mysticism. What is your spiritual journey? Well, for a low, low price, I'm certain that the mystics can tell you what your spiritual journey is going to be. Mystics, gurus, self-help, it all falls under the same general category of the same type of ideology, which is basically manifest the things you want. Sometimes these mystics involve themselves in politics, like Leon Podesta did with his spirit cooking, but it's ultimately an absurd worldview based on nothing more than feelings of how you believe the metaphysical behaves. I also actually have a problem with how this gentleman Savaya talks. It's that typified what I call wisdom speak, where you use tonality to sound wise rather than the words themselves bringing any new wisdom. New Age is really what this is. I have significant doubt these gentlemen will have anything useful to say other than things are messed up and need to change. But interestingly, people like this never seem to actually give policy prescriptions, but rather metaphysical prescriptions. What we need and what we want, instead of diving into the quagmire of believing nonsense and no serious solutions to anything, that's essentially what the New Age creed is, by the way. I'd also like to, in good faith, hear out their worldview, and my partner would also like to do so. I know, as I've talked with him before, I know I'm starting by shitting on it, and as well I should, but I do actually want to hear it out. Maybe there's some things there that we can learn. After seeing some of their videos, though, I'm kind of less than impressed. I consider this key to the topic of who are the lunatics on the internet, and I consider my opponents as those who fit the mold entirely, whereas I feel we have a much more consistent, reliable, and faithful worldview that we can demonstrate very easily, and I'm very happy to get into it. And with that, I'll yield my time.
Okay, thank you for that. You were well under the mark, as always, because, you never have a lot to say. We will move into Jim Bob for your opening statement. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'm coming from the same angle as Andrew. I'm here to listen. Where I'm listening from specifically is the wholeness of a worldview. I have an assumption, or I have basically a hunch that a lot of this is going to be based in something's wrong with the world and we need to heal the world, some sort of dialectic like that. And what I'm listening for is how you're going to tie it all together coherently. Specifically what the metaphysics are, what your epistemology is, and how you ground your moral claims for what we ought to do. Spirit Man did mention CRISPR technology as the elixir to life, or of life. Forgive me if I mess that up. Either or. I'm interested to see how he's going to argue or present an argument that justifies that statement, as CRISPR technology, for those of you who don't know, is the cutting edge of genomics, messing with DNA editing, RNA editing, and things like that. And but I'm sure Spirit Man is well aware of the potential unintended consequences, which I hope he includes in his argument.
Okay, thank you for that. And that was it for the right side. We will now move in. Savaya, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay, so you got 7 minutes on the clock. Start whenever you're ready.
All right. So I'm just testing just to see if there's an echo. Test. Okay, I'm good. I heard a little. So I would say there is a lot of there's a lot of misunderstandings about mysticism and tied in with philosophy, and then considering there's a realistic science behind it. There's a lot of people that I have heard and seen that have falsified the tradition to actually demonstrate that this is a realistic truth, or it's something that we can experience. And so it is difficult to describe, because the axiom for many mystics is that you cannot describe it. Something about those who can speak the Tao do not know the Tao. There's something along that line. And so I feel like a lot of the information that our society considers to be true is very much crafted and carefully molded by a certain type of mindset that always puts a seeming, excuse me, it puts the current public opinion into a hyperpolar opposite spectrum of right and wrong, good and bad, God versus the devil, you and a lifeless universe. And it considers that in the individual, there is no objective or instinctive force or conscience that has a direct reciprocation onto the material world, which we now know, thanks to Einstein's theory of relativity, that matter isn't really matter. It is a fluctuation of energy waves that are constantly changing. And so that would mean that every object and thing in our worldview could also be changing. And it's not necessarily as static as we may seem. And so the considerations of this could have wide-ranging effects if we invest in the individual, and how there might be this mechanism that can reappropriate a state in which there is more reality to who we are being fundamentally influential to the real world. And so I guess in my last statement, I don't know if I have one, but I think I'm going to just end it there. So.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for that opening statement. Spirit Man, you are up whenever you're ready.
Thank you for this time, guys. I'm going to try and do an okay job putting this thing together based off of your suggestions already, or your comments. I sort of opened with my ideology already in 3 parts. And amazingly, you all sort of commented on 1 or 2 sections. But I want to build also off of what Savaya said, that it's very difficult ordinarily to describe what I'm going to try and describe. But I think the more we get into your guys' ideologies, the more we can do something called sublation. So I don't know anything about you. I intentionally, I'm coming into these debates totally blind and learning as we go and trying to perform this kind of new wisdom. And so the first part is dealing with this question of what is mysticism? And Andrew, I love your honesty and your directness, because that's how you can get to the truth very quickly. What is mysticism, first of all? And I found a profound new way to interpret it. And it came through this concept of genuine philosophy. So right now, we don't have real philosophy. That's one of my claims. And that's why it looks like there's a lot of lunacy and a lot of negativity. But the reality is there's actually a lot of harmony. And it's just our perception and lack of wisdom that's creating this idea of lunacy. There's actually a higher level of wisdom based on understanding this thing called dialectics and speculative thought. and it's not known in our culture. If anybody watching this doesn't know what speculative means and it sounds all woo-woo, well, that's okay, because nobody really understands it except for maybe one philosopher named Hegel from Germany about 200 years ago. But then what is mysticism, the real mysticism? The way that you describe it, Andrew, is not real mysticism. It's historical mysticism, but the truth of the historical mysticism is that they were touching on something Savai was just saying, which is that there's a greater truth underlying all these abstract concepts we have about chopping the world up into bits. There's a more fluid, harmonious nature to it. And it doesn't just have to be woo-woo, it can actually be scientific. And I love that about your position, Savaya. But then what is this kind of scientific mysticism? It's an empty label. People have tried to do this before. It's just New Age wrapped in a new package. But I think there's something new here going on. And real mysticism is not superstition. So the way you describe it, Andrew, is actually what superstition is, mixing blood and semen and all these types of rituals. What older human beings were trying to do, ancient human beings were trying to do, was approximate the science in a proto-science that was very sensuous. And the sensuousness is what causes us to lose the science. But there's a pattern behind that if you look behind the symbology, does have a coherence to it. And that's something that Jim Bob mentioned in his talk. What is the coherent model of the metaphysics and epistemology we're trying to espouse? And the model I'm trying to espouse is this universal logic. And real mysticism gets beyond the sensuousness of superstition and gets to the science of these universal patterns that those ancients were trying to approximate. So real mysticism is actually speculative thought. That doesn't just mean making up stuff. It means that there's a symbiosis between your subjectivity and objectivity. And it's this play between empiricism and a priori idealism, these concepts pure in themselves. So when you take these concepts and you make them coherent in the world, matching them through correspondence theory, and coherent in themselves as a complete epistemology, when you do both those things at once and you interchange them, that's the real truth of speculative thought. And we're approximating it with modern science, but we're doing it in an abstract, lunatic kind of way that is making progress, kind of like how superstition did in the past. It did eventually evolve into art and then religion and then into more modern science. But modern science is throwing the baby out with the bathwater and not grasping things as a whole. This is what religion had as their truth. So I think first, as I'm running out of time, the real wisdom that we should be approaching the world with to overcome lunacy is a sublation, is a more living wisdom. And if you guys are Christians, this is what Jesus was talking about logically. This is the universal logic of life, of true spiritual life, ideal life. And then in terms of making practical prescriptions, we're making an app that's a global, worker-owned, cooperative social enterprise based on these living principles. And it's called WEWA, the Worldwide Essential Workers app. And it's about paying people fairly and distributing based off this wisdom. And then the last part, I don't know how much time I have left, but the last part is CRISPR.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, maybe I'll say a little bit more about the practical side, because mysticism is often taken as useless and doesn't say anything practical, and it sounds tonal. It's just woo, woo, woo. It sounds good, but what does it do for people? I think that labor is fundamentally a spiritual process. And Marx and other more concrete philosophers were trying to get to that when we do labor, we're actually bringing ourselves into the world in a very practical sense. And when you do it wrong, it creates oppression. And right now, what we sense in the world is, yes, there's something wrong. We don't have a sense of genuine freedom. And genuine freedom doesn't just mean just do whatever you want. Genuine freedom means engaging with the rules of the state and with each other in a higher interpersonal ethic. So if you're Christians, that's what communion is supposed to be. That's what church is. And church is not supposed to just be spiritual and that's it. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Eventually, you're supposed to make not just moral prescriptions, but universal prescriptions that can be maxims for everybody and still make coherent logical sense, despite the contradictions. So this might sound a little out there, but just in simple practical terms, it means we're going to have an app that satisfies 4 rules. They're kind of spiritual. So the first is you have to have clear goals. And the only goal that we all share in common, at least the most universal, is that we all want to be free in some sense, to actualize ourselves as we are in ourselves in our external world. The second one is that we have to have immediate feedback. So we want to be engaged. We want to have novelty. So when we do work, we want to see ourselves being in a state of growth, growing into the best that we can be. And the third part is that whatever we take on, the challenge level should be equal to our perceived skill level, or else you get overwhelmed and you lose something called flow. You get burnt out, which is what's happening in current culture, or you get bored. And so the last one is clear rules, which comes to justice. So this is where CRISPR comes in, because CRISPR is not going to be equally shared. The Nobel Prize winners are saying the public needs to know that there's this unintended consequence of stratification in our spirit if we don't have this universal equality governing the technology. Thank you. Appreciate that, guys.
I did have one brief request when we talk about CRISPR. The algorithm picks it up as being COVID, and channels have been struck for that. So instead of saying CRISPR, maybe just say, CRISP, something like this. I know it sounds stupid, but these are the way that the algorithms pick these things up. I've been on the other end of that before. Do you guys mind doing that if we dive into that stuff?
Let's call it the elixir.
Yeah, I like that even better. The elixir. We'll talk in those terms. Sorry about that, Zen. I didn't mean to cut in.
That's okay. So so that's it for our opening statements. We're going to move into cross-examination, but before we do, I want to remind everybody, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, remember to send your support for the channel via Super Chat or by becoming a channel member. The goal of tonight's debate is that all Super Chat donations are going to go to Jim Bob's gym membership so that he can grow less scrawny shoulders. So if you guys want to get Jim Bob the biggest shoulders as humanly possible, send in the biggest possible Super Chats that you can. And that way Jim Bob won't get folded like a chair anymore. Okay, I'm done. That's the last snarky comment of the night from me. If you guys want to hear more, you got to send them over Super Chat. That being said, we're also taking callers at the end of the debate. So get with the Discord mods and you can get a link to ask your questions over voice. That being said, hour and a half, the floor is open.
Jim Bob, do you
I'm
mind?
sorry. One thing before we get started. We did get a super chat from David. He asked me, Zen, do you love black people? Well, David, my response is love is love. That being said, the floor is open.
If you don't mind, Jim Bob, I'd like to move on some of the things that Spirit Man has said here.
Mm-hmm.
You do realize that communism has always had links to mysticism, right? That this is not the new phenomenon, that the communist ethos of mysticism is very old thinking. It's nothing new. That Bolsheviks were very much into mystical thinking as well. And what it sounds like to me is that you're trying to mix communism and mysticism, and that has been done. You recognize that, right?
You know, it's interesting. No, I thought you were going to say the opposite. Normally, communism is associated with atheism and non-mystical thinking. That's what Marx was trying to move away from, because he thought religion was the opium of the people.
That's modern Marxist. But if you know Marxist history, which I'm guessing that you do, you understand that there was lots of people who were high up in Bolshevik ranks who were very much into spiritualism and mysticism. You know this, right?
No, this is new, because communism started with Marx, and Marx was building off of Hegel. So Hegel was mystical in the true scientific sense, and Marx thought that he was too mystical, so he tried to chop out the metaphysics, which is the universal logic, right? So dialectical materialism was an abstract negation of what Hegel was trying to do. It was absolute atheism, meaning that no God.
Yeah,
no
but none of the
mysticism.
communists actually went off what Marx said.
Well, that's interesting. So that's why I'm interested in your opinion. If you want to explain more on what which Bolsheviks and what they believed, I would like to know.
Yeah, I can actually give you a list. A lot of them you can find in a book that my wife wrote called Occult Feminism, where she goes into many of those communist mystics who were very much into the occult. This is not anything that's new in theme. You can look at she just named some in the chat. Gleb Boki, there's a whole bunch of them, but you can dive into this theme and understand quickly this is not something that is new. Communism has been linked in with spiritualism kind of forever and ever and ever. There's another guy who will talk about this, actually. You guys may have heard of him. His name is Infrared. He is somebody who espoused modern communism. He also understands that there was a mystical side that the Russians really dived into when it came to communist theory. But it sounds to me, sir, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're a communist, right?
Great trying to clarify. That's perfect. Whenever anybody asks me that question as a genuine philosopher, I would say I'm a capitalist, a socialist, and a communist all at once.
That doesn't make any sense. These are things that are,
I know. I know.
How are you all of these things at once? I'm a unicorn, a dinosaur, and a leprechaun all at once. I mean, it's just absurd. What type of theory do you ascribe to, or are you closest to? Are you closest to communism? Because if you're talking about collectivization that's designed to get in an anti-material way, which you are, that's communism.
No, actually, our understanding what communism was supposed to be never got completed, right? Marx never finished.
Yeah, I know it's never been done the right way. I get that. I get that it's never been done correctly, theme. I get that too. But the closest, so I have to judge everything on what I can see you're closest to X philosophy, right? And then we can have some building block there so I can understand what it is you are espousing. When I say you're closer to communism or collectivism than you are for nationalism and capitalism, that would be a correct assessment, right?
No, because what you're embodying is what's called the spirit of negation. That's not Jesus' spirit. Jesus was living. So I don't know. I just want to clarify. Are you Christian?
Yes.
Okay, then. So this is maybe a good clarification that when we think about each other in terms of like the building blocks of concepts, the way we're doing it is wrong in this culture, which is why there's so much lunacy. That's why we can't get along. That's why religion and all these oppositions are warring. So
yeah, but no matter what, no matter how you frame it, you're still going to be closer to one ideology than another. If we were to have a scale, you can't directly pin yourself in the center because then you believe in nothing. And you're not espousing that you believe in nothing. You're saying that you have paradigms, collectivism, all types of things. So you believe in something.
Well, Andrew, like he can theoretically argue all three, but we're actually asking a practical question. Would you say, Spirit Man, that the thing you're trying to do that you believe we ought do has never been done in the history of mankind, and it's revolutionary?
Well, there's one guy who did, Hegel, but other than him, yeah, this is peacefully
Hegel
revolutionary.
Didn't do it. He didn't do it.
It's peaceful in your mind.
Well, that's how
it's going to be, right?
When you do it in the spirit, right? As Christians, you guys know what that means. Then it does happen correctly. But if you don't have that spirit, then it's not going to happen.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean to do it in the spirit?
That means that in the way that you're thinking and being are embodying this universal wisdom, this living logic, that this can be continuous or chopped up. So when you do it continuously, that's spirit. And it's a unifying, but it's not a naive unifying, is determinate, meaning you can have oppositions, contradictions, all these differences, difference in unity. So
can you wait, hold on. You this unity, right? You're universalizing all people and everything. There's a place for everyone and all that they're doing. In your Workers United paradigm application, do I get the freedom to be really good at and get paid well to masturbate publicly at a park?
It depends, because the laws that we implement.
I'm going to go ahead and mark lunacy number 1 on the scoreboard.
Well, okay. I wonder if we can get some moderation on the meta, because there's 3 questions open at least that I never actually answered any of them.
Okay, let's give him a chance.
I don't think you can answer them.
Bob, hold on. Let's give him a chance to answer the first question that I believe it was the masturbation one.
Well, I can work about it. The first question was about the type of mysticism in Christianity, or type of mysticism in communism with the Bolsheviks. So I would say that dialectical materialism isn't capable of true speculative mysticism. It has to be based more on superstition, because dialectical materialism that undergirds the atheistic kind of abstract mysticism of historical communism, if it's not based on that universal logic, can't be scientific, which means it has to be superstitious in some way, which is exactly what your wife is probably picking up on in terms of her books. So I don't know who Glenn Bach is. I don't know these guys, but I would love to know more.
Correct. Let me ask you a question. There was a communist revolution in Russia, right?
There was a communist revolution. There was an attempted communist revolution.
Yeah. Who did they kill?
Many people.
Who did they start with?
I think that Stalin got into trouble with the kulaks.
They killed the Tsar, right?
In Russia before the communist revolution?
No. But they killed the Tsar of Russia, and he was an Orthodox Christian, right?
Well, maybe you can educate me on the history here. Sure, let's go with that.
Yeah. Why did they kill the Christians in Russia? I'm just curious.
Probably because of ideological conflicts.
Yeah. What were the ideological conflicts?
I don't know. Go ahead. You sound like
No, I'm asking you.
I think that
elaborate on a question when I'm trying to determine your worldview. Why do you think the communists killed the Christians?
The communists killed the Christians.
Sorry,
I don't know if they attempted to kill the Christians.
Sorry,
to be honest,
Lenin killed the Tsar. But I'm asking why did the communists kill all the Christians?
I don't know if they intended to. Maybe you can educate me on this. I'm more interested in about the owning the means of production. So what I understand.
Yeah, well, I'm interested in the owning of the means of production too. But I just think that the Christians didn't want the state in some type of collectivized form to own the means of production. I think that they thought that that was against their spiritual beliefs, not just their own material structure, right? They didn't think that that was a good idea. So why do you think it is that the communists were just butchering all of the Orthodox Christians and did it like in mass? Do you think it was because they thought that they were allies of the communists, or maybe a different reason?
For me, so you seem more studied on this because you're a Christian and interested in it. But I would say that the main ideological conflict is between atheism and the Christian model of having a God beyond that you can't know.
Yeah, but they
weren't.
So
atheists believe
atheists.
That you can know.
They were just spiritualists. They were just like Hegel, right? Like Hegel, the actualization of spiritualism, like you were just talking about. They weren't actually atheistic, right? They were, I mean, maybe agnostic. Maybe you could say agnostic, but they definitely believed in the metaphysical, didn't they?
Interesting. Can anybody start timing my speaking times? I think the average I'm getting out is about 10 to 15 seconds.
All right, I'll let you respond.
But please let me, actually get an idea. So I would say that this conflict between any ideology is always the same. It's always dialectics. So I would say that if there is a conflict between Christianity and the communists, at least the historical non-mystical kinds, is because fundamentally you can't know the word of God because you're a sinful thinker. So you have to repent and you have to constantly treat God as an external beyond. And atheists think, no, genuine freedom is not about obeying some kind of authority beyond that you can never know. Real concrete freedom is knowing for yourself, which is what science was supposed to be. So I think that if you're going to base a state on this ideology of genuine freedom being self-determining, then you can't, it's a contradiction to have an ideology with the state run on a God beyond that you can't know.
Actually, I'm walking through this logic with you because I want to make sure that I can. Can you tell me how exactly science can measure metaphysical concepts?
Yeah, and that's exactly what Marx cut out. That's why the positions that you're taking are a little bit contradictory to me and don't seem to be connecting quite right, because historically, Marx didn't like understanding the metaphysical realm scientifically. He just said it was a human thing.
Yeah.
Get rid of all the
How do you?
So the way you do it is, I think, the way that Hegel did it. And Hegel, as you know, declared himself to be, in the religious consciousness, Christian. He said it was the highest religion. And it's like, that means we're negating all the other religions. But it's not. Anybody who's Muslim, anybody else who's in any other religions, there's actually a universal logic that makes sense of it all. Just like when I say I'm a capitalist, socialist, communist, it doesn't make sense to separate them. It doesn't make sense to say...
How do you use the scientific method? The question is, how do you use science, right? Andrew, restate the question, please.
I want to know how you're using the scientific method, which I'm sure you know the scientific method. You can repeat it to me real quick, right?
Yeah, I already said it's the correspondence and coherence model of truth.
Yeah, no. What's the scientific method?
The scientific method is about finding external data.
No. What is the method?
Steps.
What's the steps to the scientific method?
You mean like the 6 steps of measuring data, hypothesis, and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, all of that.
Oh, okay. Well, you're supposed to have a hypothesis that's testable, falsifiable, and then
you skip. No, you have to observe something first.
Yes. Observe, then you create a hypothesis, right?
Can you observe metaphysics directly?
No, because it's not sensuous.
So you can't do the scientific method.
Yes, you can.
So you just skip the observation.
No. See, you're being an abstract thinker right now. You can only do one or the other, but concrete, genuine philosophy, real wisdom can hold contradictions and unities and still make sense of them.
Is there a
So how we
scientific
do that?
is there a scientific process that produces real wisdom?
Yes.
What's that? Show me one example. Don't tell me the history of it or who liked it. What's the scientific methodology for producing wisdom?
I would say it is the coherence and correspondence model of truth, and one example is the heliocentric model of the universe or of the solar system. So that's one good example of it being applied, where the sensuous reality aligns with the coherence of the universal principles that underlie them.
How do we know that the model of the heliocentric model is correct?
Coherence.
No, wait. You got to back up. What do you mean coherence? How do you know it's coherent?
Because how you determine truth is based on the whole and the parts, right? So when you have truth, it's really science is really systematic, which means you take elements, base truths, and you build higher concrete truths off of them as principles. If your principles are violated, then your science isn't systematic. It doesn't make sense.
But you just gave me a hypothesis, not a principle.
Yeah, you gave a presupposition. You gave a presupposition that you can then do observations and confirm the presuppositions, but other models can do that are wrong. So we're asking you a model that's consistent and works and observably looks like it's the case isn't necessarily correct, even if it predicts in line with what you're observing. So when we ask what's the method that produces wisdom, there's no process in the scientific method when you do something that suddenly produces metaphysical wisdom. You actually have to appeal to metaphysics before you can even do science. Science is just hard material, observation, cause and effect. It's actually very limited. So I don't think anything in your answer told us. All you said is the heliocentric model. That's just another paradigm in which we can view the lens of the cosmos and its interactions.
Well, and by the way,
real quick, hang on. Sorry. So I know you guys are sparring right now. You guys are having a good back and forth. Savaya has not gotten to say a word in this debate. So if you want to step in, I know it's hard to interject here because I know you guys are on something. But if Savaya, if you have anything to add, just don't be afraid to just step in, say what you need to say. It's open floor. So.
Okay. Yeah, and I realize what's going on. And I appreciate that. I might have some disagreements with Spirit Man on certain things, but I mean, as far as political ideology goes, being communism, my understanding is that they were more of a atheistic version, and I'm not, I guess, educated with the Bolsheviks. My understanding is that they wanted power. Because the Tsar paradigm or empire was reigning for hundreds and hundreds of years, and the Bolsheviks ushered in a new system of a classless society, even though there was still a central elite that governed things. So, but it was, and there was lots of, I guess, persecution of those who had obviously religious.
They murdered everybody.
Yeah, it's really bad. But
yeah, no, I mean that doesn't even begin to describe what they did. They murdered everybody who got in their way with absolutely no remorse whatsoever.
I don't see any mysticism in that ideology.
Oh, I know you don't, but you may not be familiar with the history of mysticism inside of what was the former Soviet Union. And what it was like in the countryside for Russians who were very much into mysticism, or even the later Madame Blavatsky and all of these different mystics who brought all types of New Age ideology here to the United States, it would probably blow your mind. But that aside, I think it's important that I'm able to focus on the mystical aspect of this ideology, because it seems like you're producing philosophy with mysticism, with materialism, and you're trying to combine all three of these concepts. I'm fine with that if you can make it coherent. Thus far, it's not coherent. So where's the coherence inside of this worldview, where we've asked you now several times for your side, and I'm going to restate this one more time. The heliocentric model, that is scientific materialism. It's not a metaphysical concept. There is no metaphysics assigned with that concept at all. If you can tell me what the metaphysical aspect is to it, I'd love to know, but there isn't one. It's a physical concept. literally everything about it focuses on the material.
It's descriptive.
Yeah. So I'd like to know how are we getting from the science to the metaphysics and the process for which you want to use to have science judge metaphysics, because that is actually in opposition to Christianity, even if you don't think it is.
Okay, so we're jumping off of Savaya here, or Savaya, did you want to take a chance to answer that?
Yeah, you guys can
ahead.
interject and talk as you see fit. So
I'm a little bit more, I guess, respectful of my meta. So I'm more interested in learning because I actually don't know anything about you, but you're really strong in your Christianity. So when you were using swear words earlier, Zen, when you're introducing, so I was like, oh, is that a Christian thing? But I'm just getting to know where your guys' Christianity is at, because everybody has different flavors. And the real way of debating should be about sublation, the living spirit, right? So really, this opposition trying to win, I'm not interested in that. I'm actually learning where you're at.
But we're learning too, but we can only learn by asking questions to understand your world.
Why should it be that way, Spirit Man?
Because it's better that way. Jesus said that, right?
No. You can't go. You don't believe in the Bible and Christ as fully man, fully God, right?
Yeah, I do.
So we're asking about your worldview, right? And how and why we ought to pursue the world that you're proposing right now.
I think it's the true Christian model. I think this is Jesus's what would be called a supersensuous message, the metaphysical message. I think what we're presenting is the real message of Jesus Christ, which is also simultaneously scientific. It's also simultaneously atheistic. All these type of contradictions, he was saying them all in parable. He wasn't doing it in scientific form, though. The Trinity has truth to it, yeah.
No, that's not what I asked. Do you believe in the Holy Trinity, or are you more along the lines of a Unitarian?
See, now I don't know how you use those words. How do you use those words?
Then look up, if you want to take the time, you can look up the Nicene Creed, the Orthodox Nicene Creed, so that you can understand what Trinitarianism is. I'm asking you if you're a Trinitarian. Christians don't usually have an issue answering whether or not they're Trinitarians.
Also, is there any, how do you, because your notion of what we ought to do in the world is fully worldly. It's like the pursuit of a better world, a best version of the world, healing the world undertones, near utopia. I'm not going to slap you with utopia, but it's pursuing something near blissful where all can participate. And so you're saying, no, my view is it's pretty in line with Jesus's teaching. Yet you said a dude can masturbate in public.
So in line.
So there's too many questions open here. So what's going to happen if anybody watches this later is what's opening up is the abstraction. So we're getting enough open to have one-sidedness, but we're not actually pursuing anything to concreteness. So I want to rein it in a little bit and say, I'm not saying necessarily that you can masturbate in public, but I'm saying there might be a moment where you can do that in a restricted sense, where the carnality, the sinful sensuousness doesn't lead to unwise decisions. Because sex in itself is not a bad thing. It's the way that human beings do it in abstraction. There's a living way to do it. If you are in the spirit, there's a total awesome way to have sex.
Wait. No. Back up. Let's get into this carnal sense of sexual intercourse and why that is not, why that's a, can you give me the Christian worldview for how intercourse outside of marriage is okay?
And why it's wise.
Yeah, because marriage represents the universal logic. And when you don't understand the logic explicitly, you have to take artificial constructs, like little chopped up bits of it, because you're not wise enough to have the totality. So that's why Jesus was giving it in chopped up bits so that other people could understand it. But when you grasp the whole, the true spirit, then wherever you go, you bring it with you. And people aren't really doing that. That's why Christianity has the book, but they don't have the spirit. That's why the spirit is kind of strained right now.
Okay, so hold on. I'm not going to let you run with this. Are you saying you can be fully in the carnal spirit, jacking off on a slide somewhere at some park, and it could be, according to your absolute wisdom, that seems to be grounded in the laws of logic, right? You haven't gone beyond logic, right? It's like logic is the absolute in your world.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, because you're saying public slide, which represents children. All these things you're putting in are implicit universals.
Whatever. If you're in the spirit,
so
dude. If you're in the spirit, spirit man, right? It does. Mm-hmm. It's totally fine, right? There's a situation where that's fine, right? In your worldview.
There is, and it's not the one that you're defining though. So by saying public and all these types of things, no, I don't think you can jack off in a child's park with people around who can come and see you.
Why
I don't
not?
think that's wise.
Why not?
Because
No,
you're-
not if it's wise. Why can't you do that?
Because you're infringing on other people's rights and their carnality. They might be out of control of their carnality.
What's
so
a
you have
right?
to create more
wait,
problems.
rights. What's this rights? Where does your worldview produce rights? Is that also a scientific conclusion? Did you do an experiment to produce rights in the world?
So now I think what we need to do is, before we get into the politics and the masturbating and all that, I think we should start at the beginning, which is the metaphysics. So as Christians, you guys are like, science is in opposition to metaphysics, and you're all opposition.
No one said
you're
that.
in contradictory thinking,
No one
right?
said no one said that.
Okay, so let me just clarify then. So your guys' position is that material science is not in opposition to metaphysics.
No, the position.
Okay, so they belong together.
No, so the position, very simply put, is that science cannot explain the metaphysical.
It requires it to assume. It assumes it first.
Okay, yeah, so we agree then. So how do you guys make sense of that? How would you explain it?
How do we explain which thing?
Well, he said metaphysics comes first, and then can explain materialism.
Yeah, it has to, because consciousness comes first.
Yeah, and then you basically need to assume universals and particulars. You need an external world, the mind, names of things, categories of things, and such that you can interact with the external world, which is faith-based. And then you can go, oh, let's do this thing. I observed this effect out there in the world. Cool, let's reproduce the effect and assume X is causing Y, and let's repeat this thing over and over again and see if we come up with any regularity. And then you get science, which is still very limited. It doesn't ever produce metaphysics.
Well, it's literally designed for the physical.
Right.
It in fact, it claims it can't explain metaphysical concepts. Science itself is limited to the physical. There are no metaphysical concepts that the scientific method can even engage with. Not even chance concepts is it very good with engaging with, and those are still somewhat material concepts.
And the method itself can't tell us why we.
Let's let him respond, guys.
Hold on, it's just a button. The method itself can't tell us why we ought to value the method, which would be in the form of wisdom from your worldview. That would be wisdom, what we ought to do, a higher order of truth and such. Science can't produce these ought claims that you're referring to.
Okay, so now we're really clarifying, right? So you're saying that science is in opposition to the metaphysics.
No.
Okay, so let me clarify one more thing. And it can't make moral claims. What you're saying is that when we're going into the material realm and we're kind of chopping it up and trying to use names and stuff like that, that process that we're using with materiality, we can't use with metaphysics. That's what you're saying, right? Or can we? The process of what we think we're using to interpret the world as coherent, you can't use that kind of science with understanding the metaphysical realm.
What science is that?
Now that's a good question, because I think the hidden answer is in what is science. And I say that I
know what science is, and you know what science is because you just described the scientific method. If what you're going to describe is something outside of the scientific method, that's not science as we know it. That's something new.
You're trying to add to science right now. You're trying to sell a new science.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now you're right. I think what we have in traditional science today is not real science. It's called finite science. Hegel calls it finite science. It's abstract. It's not spiritual, mystical science. It doesn't have the metaphysics. But if you understand the true science, the living science, the infinite logic, the infinite science is what Hegel calls it, that's where you can apply the scientific model to the metaphysics as pure metaphysics, no sensuousness.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yes, and Jim Bob already hit on it a little bit. You have to start presuppositionlessly. That's the only place of the true universal. That's where the universal truth comes from, the sinless truth. If you want to go from your sinful nature, your sinful knowledge, to true divine knowledge, the pathway to get there is you have to negate everything you think you know in material reality. You have to do this.
We're blank slates. Assume that we're making no presuppositions. Explain this process to us.
So Descartes tried to do this, right? But it's not the true beginning. So Descartes said, okay, we're blank slates, but what you have to do on top of that is you have to get rid of you being there at all to be blank slated. So you have to negate even yourself.
So you can't demonstrate it.
Yeah, so when you get rid of yourself, logically, you get to the beginning, which is called pure being.
Have you ever gotten rid of yourself?
Well, you can if you do it conceptually. So if you say, well, if I'm not here to do the thinking, if you really negate everything that you think you know, including your own existence, that I think, therefore I am, can also be negated. Then you arrive at sheer negation, negating its own self. That means the sheer canceling of everything just cancels itself.
And where are you?
Wait, that sounds like a presupposition.
Yeah.
No, because it is. This is the trick. Is that it's a presupposition. It is a presupposition. Well, let me finish. It is a presupposition that is no presupposition. It is a presupposition to cancel presuppositions.
That's a performative contradiction.
Well, maybe, but it's the only one you can get away with.
No. You can't get away with it because you appeal to absolute logic, right? You've used the term logic over and over again. And now you're saying you can get rid of yourself. And if you knew that to be the case, there would be a self observing the absence of self, which is retarded. Really what you're saying is you're just sitting in a room and you should be doing something like starting a family or something else. This is all masturbatory in your head. We're actually asking for a demonstration in practice. And you said, no, well, you can't really do it. You do it conceptually. Well, how about a bunch of people just sit outside, don't get anything done, but then we argue Spirit Man said we can totally negate ourselves. We're really you couldn't argue that they weren't accomplishing something, right?
Well, they are. So when you say observing, you have to be there to observe. You're not there to observe yourself. Mm-hmm. This is where the kind of mystical concepts of implicit and explicit have to come in. So when you negate yourself and you're watching the process, there's still consciousness always observing. That's what God is supposed to be. So when you negate yourself, you're getting in touch with the absolute observance of the truth.
Who said God is supposed to be that?
Well, you don't have to explicitly say it, but I'm saying in the beginning, it is implicit that you're observing. That's what's always happening, the hidden observance of everything.
So you're okay with performative contradictions in your model?
Well, maybe explain what you mean by performative contradiction.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, here's one. You keep on saying in the beginning, observation is what was that's what was this. How do you know that?
Well, technically you don't, but I'm just trying to say there's a contradiction.
Technically you don't. Well, and why don't you?
Because you're not there to know it.
Right, because you're not there to know it. So this is what he's talking about by a performative contradiction. He's saying, look, you're selling us this line and saying, look, this is true. This thing I'm saying is true. In this case, observation. And then when we question you on it, you say, well, this thing may not be true. And that's where the problem.
And I just want to frame how ridiculous it is, just to score another point of the lunacy, is that Andrew asked you, how do you give us an example of the method in which you can apply the hard science to metaphysics? And your first position is you have to negate you exists.
Well, I'm picking up on the fact that you have to start presuppositionlessly. So you can't make any assumptions. So you can't even assume you know anything. You can't even assume that you're there.
We asked you to demonstrate that, and you failed.
Yeah, so okay, let's do this. Let's say you don't negate yourself. Okay, just do this conceptually. For me, it's not conceptual only. You can do it conceptually, but then you're just a finite scientist. I'm just trying to say you can do this if you can perform the absolute negation properly and actually get rid of yourself, including your sensuousness, including nature.
Hold on. Who observes that you've done it properly?
Well, this is the objectivity itself. Is you're getting in touch.
No. Who observes that you've done this properly?
Well, technically, just the process itself.
No, a process doesn't observe. No.
There's nobody.
Hold on.
That's a mechanism. Yeah, that's a mechanism.
Mechanisms don't observe.
Guys, I'm sorry to keep cutting in, but Savaya, if you want to get in and help your partner out, you got to just step in. You got to just speak because these things they get contentious and there's not a lot.
You don't need to coach.
But I'm just making sure that it's fair. I'm not trying to be biased or
coddling
bail anybody out.
Well, so I did have a question for Savaya. Savaya, do you think that in the case of a person wanting to negate any presuppositions, meaning a blank slate, do you think that drugs might be helpful in doing something like that?
I don't necessarily think drugs would be very helpful. Because the process remains the same as in my observation of different people that have tried to do this process that Hegel's, I guess, talking about. But I don't really know much about Hegel, which is kind of like a a paradox in my claim about Hegel, but Spirit Man's told me a little bit about this person. But anyways, the process being scientific and verifiable, these are good questions, but I think our current system doesn't have the professional body to question themselves based on the scientific method that does not allow for empirical criticism. I mean, it sounds like a mouthful of words, but where's my example?
You're basically saying the dogma of empiricism, it forces people to only assume what's true is what's empirical. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And I don't know how to speak so much to this other conversation so much, but like, I think it's simple. People say, "Oh, you're just simple-minded." Well, I honestly think that some of the principles.
I love
of life,
simple, bro. I love simple. It's my favorite.
And so, it's a paradox. I don't want to make it a paradox, but the mechanisms of who we esteem ourselves, the human race to be, has been constantly fluctuating between huge millennium pendulums of class belief. And that sounds like a mouthful. That doesn't sound simple. But in these echelons of prestigious professional thought creation industries, whether it's religion or science, the post-Enlightenment philosophical class, there's always been an attribute to truth being something that you can speak, that you can prove to someone else. But the fundamental historical, I guess, state that we have built for ourselves is constantly battling between opposites. And the mystics, which I wouldn't consider the Bolsheviks true mystics, in the sense of what my thing is, and that's just to take the extreme differences and then extract those human similarities, which some people say we have more than differences. And is that related to suffering? I don't want to go into a whole
Can I clarify something? I want to understand what you're saying. Are you saying that we ought to pursue or diminish the polarization that usually emerges between, like these extreme polar dialectics? Or you're pointing out that these things seem to be always present, that they're constantly in tension, right? And you're trying to reduce and then further unify these things so they're not in polar opposites all the time. Is that what you're saying?
It sounds like it, but no. I'm not trying to reduce or destroy or erase the hyperpoles that we have in politics or whatever, science. I'm trying to get people to see that there are other stop waving your hands, to get people to see that there are other principles between the opposites that are usually manufactured by a select group who want to be privileged in a much greater proportion than the average person. And it's very odd for me to consider that on many sides of the system. And I'm sure there's some mystics in there that have done the same thing, but the true mystics have always seemed to abject themselves to some impoverished life or to capital punishment without proposing violence as the way to bring in the utopia. So
you're anti-class. You want to reduce classism?
No.
Do you guys want to do anything?
Yeah. What do you want to do?
Yeah. What do you want? So let me try to boil this down. So we've gone over metaphysical concepts and this kind of thing. I think that that's all fair, but we only got a half hour left. I'd like to just dive into what the hell do you want? What the hell do you guys want? What is it? What is the outcome you want to see? What is the society? What do you guys actually want here? And if
essentially,
you ask me the same question back, I'll explain to you what it is that I want to see. I think that that's fair, but I'd like to just know, what do you want?
essentially, we
And
want to
before
give.
you answer, try to emphasize brevity or condense your answer, because I think your last couple explanations were very long-winded, and I think we were losing some of the audience. So just try to be as condensed as possible, Savaya. But sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Essentially, we are trying to give awareness, information to the public so that they can make their own decision on how duality, opposites, can be used to fuel entropy. And
Yeah, but wait, no, you're not trying to get the public information that they can then reject. There's an outcome here that you want to see. There's something here that you want to see
Practical.
happen.
In practice.
You know, otherwise you wouldn't be delivering the information to begin with. So what is that thing?
go ahead, Spirit Man.
Okay, so I'm analyzing the meta here, and it looks like they're winning, right? Like the meta team who is looking at this, like, the Mark's not saying anything useful, and but what's happening is I'm starting with an abstract concept, which is the opposite of what you guys want to believe. I have to start there, but then I'm actually going to rebuild what you want to believe, which is God exists. So I can keep doing what I'm doing, which is the presuppositionless beginning, which makes logical sense.
No, don't do a Yelp review. Don't do a Yelp review
But
of the debate.
I think I have to actually start with your position. So I would say that you can't really start true knowledge with an assumption. Most people think faith is that you have to start with this belief in God. But the reality is that faith is just the beginning. Spirit is a knowing. So you have to understand God in its scientific form, in its metaphysical form,
That's
which
not
is
what
what
the Bible
coherence
says.
is.
The Bible says
Well,
that,
no, the
God
Bible
makes
says you have to start with faith.
God makes himself apparent to all people. He doesn't say, does God mention the scientific method anywhere or
Did he
science
say
anywhere?
you will know me through the scientific method and the world itself?
That's what divine knowledge is. That's what spirit is.
And
so let me explain.
No, it's not. Where did you come up with this idea that that's where spirit is in the determination of the scientific method? There's nothing here that's biblical. Can you reference any of the Bible to back up your claim that this is what God meant when he said these things?
Yeah, so if I can get a minute to explain it. Okay, so for instance, the story of the Garden of Eden is actually supposed to be a story about knowledge. And so in the beginning, most Christians interpret it in its abstract form, which is that you eat from the tree of knowledge and you become sinful because it separates you from God. And then you make a bunch of mistakes as a sinful creature and you experience a tremendous amount of pain because human knowledge can never be divine knowledge. And then you're ignorant, you make mistakes, and you sin over and over again. And that's the story. That's about how that biblical story is interpreted. But
no,
there's
hold
another...
on. Oh, hold on.
Yeah, let's let him finish. He asked for a minute. We'll give him the minute. I know I want to dive in just as bad as you, but I'll give you the minute.
So I said the thing that is the abstract moment, but now we're going to move into the concretization of it. This is how you get to divine knowledge. Is that the real truth of that story is you're supposed to, as a finite sinful creature, actually obtain divine knowledge through knowledge. You're not supposed to get rid of it. You're only supposed to get rid of the limit. When you get rid of the limit of sinful knowledge, that's where spirit is. And spirit is the return back to divine knowledge as explicit, which means that you can think it and not just have to follow the law abstractly. So when you determine it for yourself, that's what spirit is supposed to be. But you're not supposed to do it in this abstract warring way, right? You're supposed to do it in this speculative way, this kind of mystical living logic, which is always thinking itself perfectly. And we as finite creatures have to begin with faith. You have to begin there because that gives you the energy to want to pursue this divine knowledge. But once you actually have that faith firm, you know that the world is rational, that it actually does make sense, that there is goodness, there's blessedness. That's what the whole politics is about, that we're kind of espousing in a Christian
so what
life.
was the snake there for? What was the serpent there for?
The serpent is about deception.
It's
right?
about deception. And what was the deception?
Deception is about understanding that
now, what
the only
was
way
the deception of the serpent?
The deception is that you are not God, that you are not connected to God.
That's right. So the deception is you are not God. The same thing. So I just want to make sure I
let me clarify. You are not connected to God.
Yeah. Do you think that we're all gods?
Well, that's what spirit is,
Right.
right?
But so you
It's
think
God on earth.
wait, so you think we're all gods, right? And that we
Well,
have
I
inner
think we're all
energy that
spirit.
needs to manifest itself, correct?
No, I think that to be a Christian, you have to understand the spirit in your being and in your thinking, not just in faith alone. To be a real concrete Christian, you have to think
I
the
don't believe
spirit
in
and not
faith
just have the
alone.
faith in it.
I don't believe in sola fide. Okay, that's not
Okay,
my
perfect.
sola
So what do you?
fide. Sola fide is not the orthodox jam. Going backwards though, from sola fide, I want to know this because this concept is very important to me to understand your worldview.
Mhm.
Do you think that we human beings can be gods?
Well, was Jesus a God?
Answer the question.
Jesus was God.
That's right. And if we follow that way, what does that make us?
Followers of God.
Followers of exactly.
You don't just follow spirit, you become spirit.
No, you asked what does that make us? It makes us followers of a man, fully
Can
man,
you
fully God.
become God?
You can remember Jesus said if you really understood what he was doing, understood it, believed in it and understood it, if you really did, you would do greater things than he. Not the same, greater on earth now. Greater.
Great.
How can
Let's
you do greater than
pull
God?
up the passage so that we can examine it.
And did
Go
God
ahead. I don't
pursue
have
worldly knowledge to be so great?
Remember, you can be in the world but not of it. So this is the universal logic.
I
That's what
asked
he's
you a
describing.
question.
So yeah, Spirit Man, I sorry to cut in. They're asking you seemingly direct questions, and I think the responses are getting a bit evasive. I didn't hear a clear answer to Andrew's question. Do you believe that we can be gods? Do you believe that? Or?
Well, this is the thing: is the way you define spirit, no, but the way we define spirit, maybe. So the only thing that matters here is the difference on how do we define spirit. So
Well,
how do you guys?
how do
define
you
spirit?
think we define spirit?
I think you define spirit as something that you're not supposed to think for yourself.
Why would you put that assumption that we define spirit as being something where you don't think for yourself? I'm just curious. Do you know what the concept of free will is? Is the concept of free will mean think not for yourself? I'm just
curious. Think that yourself too?
Exactly. So we're actually getting closer. We're actually agreeing.
Closer to lunacy.
How do you guys really interpret the spirit then? Maybe that would be a better way to start.
Through theosis.
What's theosis?
The manifestation of trying to become more like Jesus Christ. However, understanding that Jesus Christ is God, you're not going to become God. That's insanity. Right? And by the way, I can give you many Bible passages explaining why that's insanity. I would like to go back to this reference, though, because I feel like you don't want to give me a direct answer, even though in your videos, I think that you have directly answered this. You do believe that we can become gods, do you not?
Well, if you believe that spirit makes human beings unsinful, closer to blessedness and divine knowledge, if you believe that's what spirit is supposed to do, not just in your being, but also your thinking, then that's what it means to follow Jesus Christ.
What's the essence energy distinction? Do you know what that is?
The essence energy distinction?
Yeah.
Who makes that distinction?
Well, the distinction is made by God. The Orthodox teaching, which is the original church of Jesus Christ, explains this. And you don't know what this is, though, right?
Well, I might have my own language, but I'd like to know how you mean it.
Okay, so what I mean it as is that you can never, ever partake in the actual, I believe it's energy versus essence. You can never be, you can experience the essence, but not the actual energy. You can't be God. In other words, let me just try to break it down the easiest way I can. You can't be God. You know who wanted to be God? Who wanted to be God? Who wanted to be God?
The devil.
The devil.
And what did the devil want to take the law and make a new format for the world? You know, so the other question is this: following of Jesus, did Jesus go out and say we're going to make a new Eden right here if we just all gather together and sign up for this app?
Yeah. So no, I misspoke. It's true. I misspoke.
The reverse energy.
So it's the reverse. But the distinction is still the same. What I'm saying is that you can't. The ultimate point is you can't be God. The only person or the only entity that ever tried is the devil, right? So I'm asking you specifically and concisely, and I just want a yes or no answer. Can we be gods? In your definition, no.
In your definition, no.
In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your definition, no. In your defini Okay, what's the distinction?
The definition of spirit, the terms that we're using aren't the same. So I am being honest. I'm like, the way you guys define your words isn't in the true Christian
spirit is God to you.
Say that again. Spirit
is identical to God. So is it like a vague spirit? Is the spirit, what is spirit? It's just a word, right? We don't get a sense of how do you, is spirit a one thing? Is it a one or many things? Is it, is there a method by which, let's say me and you both are saying we've achieved spirit? How do you delineate who has actually achieved this? What's the standard for spirit?
That's where we get back into the metaphysical coherence. That's the science of the metaphysics, but you have to do it in the living spirit.
That doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, let me get more detailed. So I guess when you say, is God and spirit the same? Well, in Trinitarian thinking, no, because God is the abstract, perfect knowledge of the essence, right? And then we are the negation of that, and spirit is the union of the two. So they're not equivalent, but they are all one. So they are the same, but they're different. Right?
If you and me both claimed we're in spirit, in your view, not my view, in your view, how do you determine who's right or wrong? If we disagree, if we both claim I'm in spirit, I'm one, I'm close to God, I'm almost God right now. Spirit man, you feeling this? And you go, yeah, I'm totally feeling this. And then you start to extrapolate, right? And then you realize we disagree on something. Well, who's God?
That's exactly right. So when you're feeling is faith-based. So spirit is not just faith-based. You can actually think it. So when you say, hey, we disagree on something, you're being explicit. And you're saying, well, here's what I disagree on. And you use a concept. And then I'll use a concept because that's the way we communicate is by universal.
So debating is being God then?
Well, debating in the spirit, in the living spirit of the church.
Begging the question, I'm asking you, how do you know you've achieved in spirit? If two of us, if both of us claim we've achieved spirit, how do you determine who's correct if we disagree?
Which one has the more coherent model in a more universal sense?
So if your model in the universal sense is you have to negate yourself as a human being and a mind and a being who can look at the world, even coherence, because coherence is a presupposition too, isn't it?
Well, you don't need coherence when you do the absolute negation.
Negation assumes logic.
No. Well, so yes, here's the contradiction, is that if you have to start presuppositionlessly, meaning that no sin, basically what you're doing is you're canceling sinful knowledge. So if you have to cancel all sinful knowledge, how would you do that? Even your very being is sinful.
The only way you could do this is with no
shotgun.
Knowledge.
With what?
So is with no knowledge.
Right, exactly.
So okay, so if we're talking about lack of knowledge and we're going back to the story of Eden, right?
No, you're even canceling the Garden of Eden. You're even canceling the notion of God.
But there's a tree of knowledge. Where did knowledge come from?
No, you're canceling everything the
tree
where did
knowledge come from? In the Garden of Eden, right? Don't eat of what? The tree of what?
You don't need to know where it came from. You're just canceling it. Just saying, I don't care. It could have came from a good place. It could have came from a bad place. Just cancel it all.
How do you have the knowledge of canceling knowledge?
Not just that.
Because we're here. You're not canceled yet, right? Don't make that mistake.
Wasn't the knowledge of good and evil?
Right. That's where we're at right now, right? So just where we're at right now, sinful creatures, just can't use whatever sinful knowledge you have and just cancel it all as much as you can. If you can do it universally,
just cancel it all as much as you can.
It could be akin to the Socratic quote in which he said that I am wise because I know nothing.
Yeah, but that would be knowledge.
You're denying the wisdom of God, so that's a sin. That's a sin. That's a sin itself.
The trick here is that
saying negate your sinful knowledge, which is a sin.
No. If we think we know God, that's sinful. So you're canceling that. You're canceling even your sinful notions of God to get to the true God. And in order to do that, you have to start godlessly to get to the true God.
And the true God is you in the end. The true God is you in the end.
No. The true God was always eternal. It was there before you even existed in your finite form.
You said you become it. So it's you also, right?
Well, spirit. You become it in spirit, but you can't be it in itself. It can only be itself perfectly.
Because it sounds like a presupposition, and it sounds like knowledge that you have. How do you know that you can't become the God?
Yeah, how do you know that?
Say that again.
How do you know you can't become the God?
Because the God is a concept that existed before time space.
You don't think that the God is real?
No, it is real, but it's real in the supersensuous realm. which is what Christians call heaven.
But you also said you can get to
So
him.
so it's real in the metaphysical world,
Yes,
but
Hold
it's
on.
not. But it's not real as a physical concept.
it is here. That's what spirit is. Spirit is the
Okay,
physicalization
great.
of that world.
So then all of this preconditioned knowledge that you have, which leads you to the belief that you can become a god, but not the god, is based on what?
Well, you can actually do both, but you have to be in the spirit. That's
So
where the
you
trickiness
can become
is.
the god.
Well, you can know that you can be the God, but you have to do it in spirit. That's called absolute spirit. But if you don't have that, you're right. If you don't have that, you're right. Jesus had that. That's why Jesus could do it.
Spirit.
That's why Jesus is 100% man, 100%
So
God.
was Jesus the Son of God?
Jesus was 100% God, 100% man.
And the Son of Man too.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
the Son
So,
of Man. He was all of it.
do you think that Jesus could have been a person other than Jesus if he had transcended himself in the same way that Jesus had?
If he did some science.
Well, the living science, the infinite science, the Christian science, which is what theology is trying to approximate, as you guys know. So they're already trying to do it. That's what they tried to do in scholasticism for 1,000 years. If we do it right, we can continue that work. But you can also do it in the atheistic sense, which you don't understand yet, but you can if you're
He's
in a true living
asking, could
spirit.
any one of us have become Jesus using your methodology? That's not even
Well,
explained, by the way.
that's the thing, guys. What does Jesus say? He says, he's already in you. You just don't realize it. So yes, you can, because he's already there. You're just the serpent has deceived you.
We're assuming Jesus doesn't exist, right? We're saying using your methodology, any one of us in time could have just been Jesus, right?
Well, I don't understand your argument exactly. What do you mean?
You're saying we can become spirit, and Andrew asked, could any of one of us become God? And if you're saying Jesus is fully man, fully God, you can get there through spirit. We're asking you to remove, negate,
even above. You can be
above,
even
yeah,
above
beyond,
what
above,
that
yeah.
is.
Mhm. So basically, your assumption is that you can become God through spirit, right? And let's say you take your methodology of negating all knowledge, right? So let's negate the knowledge of Christ and the Bible and all of the historicity and all the wars.
No, you're
and
negating your sinful understanding of it. You're going to get in touch with the true interpretation of the Bible this way. That's the clarification that's important here. If you want to understand the Bible and its universal godlike logic, you have to get rid of your finite sinful version of it.
But that's an assumption of knowledge.
Well, no, because you're getting rid of knowledge through the assumption of knowledge.
No, you can't do that. That's a contradiction.
Well, you can. So what are you left with if you don't know anything? You're left with sheer indeterminate
We're left with a
immediacy.
presupposition that you could ever get to
Absurdity.
a state where you know nothing.
Lunacy.
No, you're in a state where you know so nothing that you can't even tell what it is.
No, we're in a state where you're giving us a presupposition and telling us to presuppose there's no presupposition.
Right.
No, I'm saying, well, if you guys don't think you exist right now, that is the presupposition. Yes. If you believe you exist right now, that's the presupposition you have to rely on.
Do you believe we exist right now?
Well, I think that we exist in either an illusory sense or in a true sense. And we're not sure which one it is, but it seems like something is happening.
Well, which one do you think?
It's real or illusory? What are you, Jordan Peterson? Like, what? You got to pick one. You got to pick one.
Well, I think that we're actually here, but in a simulated sense. So you get both of the two. So when
you're
you
a simulation
back,
theorist? Are you a simulation
well,
guy?
no, I'm saying that there's a way to think about it where they're both true, but in a divine way, where your free will comes into it. Because if God's all knowing, there has to be an element of not knowing, but that element of not knowing comes through your free will. That's the gift.
Okay.
That's what,
Wait,
that's
what?
What?
What did you just say? Did you just say if God's all knowing, there has to be an element of not knowing?
Yes, for you to have real free will.
Well, how did no? That's not true. That's Calvinist speak. That is Protestant speak. Can you explain to me why such a thing is necessary?
Well, the thing is, because you're connected to God at all times in spirit, you actually do know everything. You have to do an act of thinking you don't know.
But
that's what the serpent is.
But you
the
think you
serpent
know.
deceives
But
into
you think you
thinking
know
don't
that.
know.
But you think you know that.
Well, here's where we have to determine it, right? So in spirit, you have to actually negate what you think you know and start with absolute nothing.
No,
Hold on.
This
Spirit, immediate indeterminacy.
No, all of this, what you just said again, could be sinful knowledge. Yes or no? Could be.
Well, no. Well, I'm canceling it all.
No, you're actually proposing it. You're making propositions.
Well, let's just say I'm gonna attempt to cancel everything I think I know, and I end up at sheer immediate indeterminacy. I just don't know. There's so little. You can't even tell what it is. That's where you end up if you cancel everything.
Okay, you've been there.
Well, just think about it. It makes logical sense.
Have you been there?
There's no time. There's no space. There's no. Yeah, I've been there.
Oh, really? Were you at McDonald's or where were you?
It's not in time and space. So you have to do it in your inner world, in the inner church.
Okay,
You have to do that through
inner
through
church.
true thinking.
Okay. So
So if you think about it, you said earlier, I just want to say one point before we run out of time. Andrew, you said our views don't make coherent sense. Every time you use that word coherent, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means logically connected and consistent. So you are already talking about this universal logic. You just don't realize it.
your
because
worldview can't
hang on,
justify
hang on.
logic.
Spirit of negation.
Wait a
not in the
second.
spirit of
Wait a
life.
second. Does logic
ahead.
have laws?
Yeah,
Okay, so do you think that I'm using the laws of logic for coherency?
you are, but in an abstract sense,
Yeah,
which
but
is not the living life.
you say it's universal, but I disagree. I think that logic is not universally applied. You would agree that that's true, right?
It's true and it's not true. So if you mean it in the divine sense, then these
Well,
laws are
something.
universal.
Wait, no, you just went against one of the laws of logic. Something cannot be true and not true at the same time, can it? That would be a contradiction, wouldn't it?
No, it can, but that's what appearance is.
No, it can't.
Right.
What can be true but not true? What can be circle but not or circle and square at the same time? What can be round and triangular at the same time? Can you give me an example of any of these things?
Yeah, being and pure nothing. So pure being and pure nothing are the same, but
There is
completely
no such thing as pure nothing that you can demonstrate.
Yeah, there is. It's in opposition to pure being.
Yeah,
But
show
pure
it.
being is
Demonstrate it.
Dude, hold on, Spirit Man. Not yet, Spirit Man. I should call you. You just said pure being is in what? Opposition to what?
Pure being isn't in opposition to anything. Pure nothing is in opposition to pure being.
So you think you can get to pure nothing?
Well, you get to pure being first. That's the sheer indeterminacy. But when you try to understand the pure being, it turns itself into pure nothing to become pure becoming. But then the pure becoming turns into determinate being, which turns into quality, which eventually turns into the absolute idea. Which is
hold on. Can you get to pure nothing? Can you get to pure nothing?
You can get to pure nothing.
Hold on. Just stay there. If you can get to pure nothing, but pure nothing is the negation of being, that necessitates being exists, so there's not nothing. There's something.
That's the contradiction, exactly.
Yeah,
So
your worldview is contradictory.
No, if you thought pure nothing, then you wouldn't be here to know.
Oh, wait, it's not coherent, Jim Bob?
Then it's not nothing.
So it's not coherent.
Then it's not pure nothing.
Pure being is sheer immediate indeterminacy that when you try to know it, pure nothing is actually more than sheer indeterminacy. So when you try to think indeterminacy, you're doing more than pure nothing. Like you're doing more than indeterminacy. So the contradiction makes sense, but you have to think it. But you have to literally get rid of all you think you know, guys.
Contradiction can't make sense.
Okay. You have to.
Unless you become like a child, you will not attain the kingdom.
Is it a contradiction?
And children are not constantly having to think this specific system in which we objectify.
Children think, and you know how I know? Do you know how I know the difference between you and I when you say something like you must become like a child? I have children.
Me too.
I have a feeling you have zero, right, Savaya?
I have 7.6 billion children. Thank you.
Yeah, no. Do you have any that physically came from you?
You have to keep
it
alive.
All came from me.
That you have to keep alive.
Yeah. So none. So the thing is that children do think. Where this idea comes from that children don't think, like you thought when you were a child, don't you think?
The way we are structuring thought, though, as children, is not in a systematic way.
But
We're
you are
just
thinking.
Fluid, and there's no real, I guess, specific label in which we are defining everything.
Are children always learning, Savaya?
Yes.
Does that require thinking?
No.
No, you can learn without thought?
Yes.
So what do vegetables learn?
They learn over the course of an entire life that...
They learn what?
It may not have been in their best interest
to be
vegetables. What you need to do is they implicitly learn, but they don't explicitly learn. So they're trying to make you sound nuts by saying they explicitly learn, but
we don't need to try.
Yeah,
real quick.
There's no attempt here.
Real quick.
So I don't know if we have enough time, but do we have closing statements?
Real quick, Spirit Man. Sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off. We have about 25 minutes left in the open dialogue here. Just want to remind everybody to please like, share, subscribe. If you have questions or comments, they will take priority if you super chat them. And we're also doing call-ins at the end of the debate, so you can get with the Discord moderators to get the stream link to ask your questions. That being said, Savaya has gotten in a little bit here. I've been trying to give you some chances. This is the last attempt I'll make in the debate. Savaya, if you want to get in, get your rhetoric and your dialogue in, because
Yeah, I would actually like to pose some of these questions to Savaya. So I understand that you have 7.5 billion children. I would contest that you have 7 billion children. But let me just ask you this in this way to make it as specific as I possibly can. Have you personally yourself in the body that you're in right now impregnated a female and she has had a child that has your specific DNA sequence in it? No. Okay, so you don't have any kids. So this was abundantly clear to me when you said this bizarre thing, like you have to be like a child, right? Like children were unthinking. As Jim Bob will tell you, as fathers will tell you, children, even, I mean, almost the second they come out of the womb, the second they come out of the womb, they're thinking. They are thinking. So I don't know where this bizarre concept. This is one of those things I was talking about in my opening, where people, they use a certain tone to try to sound wise, but when you question them on the actual wisdom that they're espousing, it's just nonsense, right? Children think, bro. And often and all the time and nonstop, and that's the way that children operate. I'm just letting you know, so that in the future, maybe you won't make a statement like that.
The structures that we put in place for children are all oftentimes imposing a specific bias from an institutional historical institution.
Good.
That was run by self-centered individuals, oftentimes, not everyone, but this line of how we esteem our educational process is very much created through.
So my children belong to my lineage. I want them to be inducted into my ideology, my framework, my way of thinking, my way of life. I want them to understand good from evil and understand my values and structures. What in the world would be wrong with that?
Well, the structures in which Christianity was brought up in was very much, I guess, molded by the same exact elite class that had no empathy for people of different beliefs. So they killed them.
Ridiculous.
Constantine,
Christianity,
the Nicene Council.
no. Christianity, back to the Byzantines, were the best when it came to a multitude of beliefs. Christianity has been the cornerstone. In fact, this nation, which is right now the most multicultural, the most in the way of biracial, this is still a nation which considers itself to be a Christian nation. Over 2/3 of this nation consider themselves to be Christian, right? And it seems to be the most tolerant, and it seems to be the most biracial, seems to be the most of all of those things that you're espousing there. So bizarre to me that you would crack down on Christianity when the things that you seem to be espousing are tailored towards the Christian message.
Well, most people don't know about the Library of Alexandria.
I know about the Library of Alexandria. It burned down.
But as far as the interests and the archives that were involved in it,
they burned down. We don't know what was in them.
Well, in the Christian tradition, there are those who have visions. And yes, there are charlatans, there are quacks, but there are sometimes individuals who have a very unique, shocking experience.
Yeah,
like
it's called
Hildegard
Revelation.
Von Bidlen, or whatever her name is. And
yeah, you're talking about Revelation.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, yes, there are people who have revelation, but when you bring up like the Libraries of Alexandria, we don't even know what was in the Libraries of Alexandria because they burned to the ground. We have no clue what was in them. None. Almost no historical documentation remains. Very little.
But we're still getting to what you couldn't answer this question. What do you want? Like, what do you want the world, your direct local society to be? We haven't been able to get this out of either of you. And it should be very clear. We want X.
We want to bring
Yeah, we want to know
awareness.
what you want. Essentially, we want to know what you want.
Okay.
The extremist poles in our identity that are often manufactured on all ideological fronts, suggesting that it is through idea that we esteem what truth is, when in fact, maybe it's the other way around.
Okay, and how about you, Spirit Man? You
Just a
want
quick question.
everyone to take their elixir, crispy chicken sandwiches.
Don't
Sorry.
say, we're talking elixir. We can't say
Yeah,
the other word. But
I
Zen,
know.
just quickly, do we have closing statements, or we just go right to the end?
Oh no,
Well,
I'll
we're
let you
not
guys
there
know
yet.
when we go.
They'll let
Yeah.
us know when it's time for the closing.
Okay, so I do get a chance. Okay.
I'll let everybody get a full closing statement in. So yeah.
Okay, because we're figuring out the meta as we go. And I thought with the Christian channel, it would be a little bit more sublative off the bat, but this is a very interesting vibe and I'm learning a lot. But to answer your question more directly, Jim Bob, I think what we need to do is create, in terms of Christian language, the atheists that are on the channel, you know that I'm able to do this atheistically too, but in terms of Christian language, we're bringing kingdom come. We are bringing the blessedness of the Spirit to earth, fully realized in faith and in our thinking, so that we can actually create a state based on that kind of spirituality, concrete spirituality, here in the now.
Worldliness.
So, what's that?
Yeah, you're pursuing utopia on earth.
Well, remember, the blessedness doesn't mean be naive. You're supposed to love thy enemy. So we're not going to negate and say that, oh, nobody can have conflicts. You're going to have conflicts, but the Spirit absorbs those conflicts in a unity. So you still love. You even love your enemies. That's what he was talking about.
And you
So I'm
still
talking about
test the
realistic.
spirits, so you're not just, oh, it's all, just love them and it's all fine. No, you test the spirits. And
How do you know
see-
you're not interacting with a demon?
Yeah, what's the mechanism you test the spirits with? I'm just curious.
Science.
Well, love, well, in a way.
You test the
love
spirits with love? The
love is-
subjective chemical measurement?
Well, I mean, I'm going to explain what I think love is, but you're not asking me what I think love is. You're just assuming, right? But how do you define love? And then I'll tell you how I define it.
How I define love is meaningless to what I just asked, and I'll ask it again, and then I'll give you a definition because I think that that's fair. But I want to ask this again. How do you test one of these good spirits against one of these bad spirits?
Well, self-recognition in a universal sense that then creates coherence in your identity with theirs and the world all at the same time. So that sounds crazy, but it's basically this. In the Christian language, it's about finding your coherence with God. That's how you know
What
it, in
about your
feeling
language?
and in your thinking.
You're
But what
borrowing
about your
Christian language.
Well, I don't know if it's borrowing. I think this is the true Christian language, and we haven't had it for like
you
2,000 years.
didn't really express. You just made another claim. What we want to know is, you feel like you're in the spirit, right? We want to know, how do you determine whether it's an evil spirit or the spirit you're talking about, which is really the spirit of spirit, man. I mean, you already know it's you. I think the answer is it's a demon, but that's my opinion. You
We're trying
tell
to find
us
the distinction.
Yeah,
What's
how
the
do you make the
distinction?
distinction between the whispers of good and the whispers of demons?
So I will
Because-
hijack you, Spirit Man, and just
Yes,
say, the history of narcissists have had a basic trend to black and white, us versus them, in mentality within most belief systems. And there's a gray zone where they say it's all bad or it's all good. And these two sort of trends that we've seen are very abject ways to see the epic, fanatical, the ends justifies the means, and thereby just not treat others as human beings. And that is a very good way from history to see how we are being moved by the ego or sin or the whatever you might call a demon or something like
Yeah.
that.
So I actually, I'll give you a tiny bit of ground here. Okay. Just a smidge. I'm going to be as charitable as I can and go over to narcissism. It's one of the things that you pointed out to as a trend of narcissism. Can I ask you a question, Savaya? And I really need you to think about it before you answer it. Could you think of anything more narcissistic on planet Earth than making the claim that you could become God?
And that you can father every child. Go on.
Ye are gods. It's in your book.
Why don't you show me where it is in my book?
Google. I mean, it's
I have to
right at your
Google.
fingertips.
I have to Google this passage that you know so much in my book.
Is that your direct interpretation? You just opened it and read that? No other additional
But I just
web
want
of
to
knowledge?
know. I just want to know though, even if it's in my book, and my book is completely wrong, could you in any way, shape, or form tell me what you would ever consider to be a more narcissistic claim than I am God? What could ever be more narcissistic than that? Ever?
Sure.
Anything. Give me
Yes.
anything on that you could ever think of that would be more narcissistic than I am God.
Someone who is saying, I am God, so don't question me.
Well, it's the same thing.
Synonymous.
I'm saying question me, and I'm God.
Well, then how do I know you're God? If I can question
test
you.
the spirits. I just gave you a little synopsis on how, like, in history, we are constantly battling, and in these subterfuges of all sorts of different calamities, personal feuds, squabbles. It's these things can be seen from these three different trends.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll just give it to you. Can you give me anything that could ever be more narcissistic ever than I am God, but you can still question me? I still can't think of a single thing.
But don't
that's
question
more
me. I didn't say
narcissistic
to
than
question
saying
me.
I am God, no matter what qualifier you give after that. I actually can't think. Like, I know the most narcissistic, like the internet's full of the most narcissistic fuckers you could ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
They don't claim that they're God, regardless of qualifier or disclaimer after that. I can't think of a claim more narcissistic than that.
Okay, well, I gave it to you, that to not question
Yeah, but
me.
I'll just yield it and say even if we go with that, that's still the most narcissistic claim. Can you think of anything outside of that?
Andrew, maybe another parallel would be we as humans can bring kingdom come here on earth. Maybe is synonymous with I am God, but maybe a whole variety of those claims are still the same, assuming to be God. Yeah, and I really still haven't heard a mechanism that a methodology by which you determine good. All I heard from Savaya is narcissism breeds some sort of trend.
Ideologies.
This doesn't tell me in Spirit Man's world, right? How does he determine if he's talking to an evil spirit or a good or spirit himself, the spirit, which we've determined is actually Spirit Man this whole time? So how do you know you're just talking to yourself, Spirit Man, or talking to a demon version of you or someone else whispering? I want to know just step by step. I don't want a whole spiel. Just how do you do it?
So great question. Okay, so really it comes down to self-recognition in the other. So anything that actually makes you separate from other things and not love it is already out of the spirit. So number one, that's the emotional way to do it.
Loving sin. So you love sin.
No, when you see yourself in the other, that's the logical contradiction where you can't just love sin. You have to love your true ideal self in the other. That means you have to see your best self in the other. If you see an addiction, you know the addiction is hurting you. That's not it. You're trapped in impulsive love. That's why I was trying to get Andrew to define it.
No, this is begging the question, because your best self in your worldview is full in spirit, right? So I ask you, how do you determine you're fully in spirit? And you said, well, you first have to know that you're fully in spirit. You just said that.
No, you don't have to know you're in spirit. You have to know love. And we at least know love most of the time. Let me actually just give me enough time to explain, because I'm building it. So when people think of love, they actually think of it in 5 ways. They don't think it in the speculative way I'm talking about. So when it looks like we're disagreeing, we're not actually disagreeing. I'm educating right now. Any point that we're actually having friction is not actually a hard opposition.
There goes the negation of knowledge, huh?
Also, it's actually teaching, like, for instance, absolute negation to get to presuppositionlessness, which I don't think you've ever heard before in your life. Neither have I until I did it.
It's because it's
but
absurd. Absurd. We've never heard of it because it's listen.
Maybe
to say that we should have no presuppositions is a presupposition. Why don't you get that? It defies the very laws of logic.
The very conclusion.
You know what I mean?
The very conclusion is a presupposition. The very moment you go, I've reached it. It's like the ego. Like I destroyed the ego. Who destroyed the ego? How would you know that's not the ego talking about? It's the same problem, right? I've escaped the simulation. Okay, how do you know that's not it's all the same problems, right? You're just, the vagueness actually suits your worldview quite well, but you're not going to get away with it on this channel.
Well, hold on. Am I being
Yeah,
vague, or am I
Spirit
just not
Man.
allowed to explain?
Vague, contradictory, self-refuting, all of the worst things.
Well, I mean,
Like,
how
for
many
instance-
hours does it take you to explain these simple concepts? Like, we get the concepts. We're not retards. We understand what you're saying, right? And we just haven't gotten good answers out of you to what those things are. You are making presuppositions about presuppositions, right?
But it's the presupposition that is not a presupposition. For instance, if you have the truth, you can't assume anything, or else it's not the truth, right?
It is the
Logically.
contradiction that's not the contradiction. It
That's
is
right. So-
the circle that is a square. It is the triangle that
I
is a
think the
rectangle.
problem here is I'm just not allowed to talk. That's the thing, is we're not going to get to a
quick
concrete
notice,
answer.
and yet we're going to go back to you, Spirit Man. Just a quick notice: we have 10 minutes left in the debate, so let's try to flesh this topic out completely, and then we'll wind it down from there.
Can you define truth, Spirit Man?
Truth is, well, see, truth is the scientific, coherent, and correspondent model to the parts in the whole in a living logic, in a living universal way. That's the truth.
Does something need to previously exist for that to be the case?
Well, that's the nature of eternity, is that it always existed, but you can still begin it formally.
So there's something before your description of true.
Only formally. You missed the important word.
Could you do any science or coherency? Can you participate in coherency of truth or correspondence without assuming first that something's true? That's the question.
Well, that's the assumption that is true, is that you're here now. That's the only thing that you
Anything
really have
else? No, that's not it. I agree,
Nope.
but there's anything else?
Once you have that, you cancel it all, and then you get back to pure being. And then the true universal logic starts. The sinless logic.
So based on
Sinless
your
logic.
so you're based on your own answer, your definition of truth is now not exactly the definition of truth.
No, I'm saying this is the true Christian definition of truth.
No,
If
the
you
true
think about
the true definition of the Christian definition of truth is not a description of the world.
I already gave you the logical description. It's the whole like it's the coherence of the parts in the whole in a living logic, correspondently and coherently.
What
It's just-
unifies
when I
the
say
parts?
coherent-
What unifies the parts and the universals and the particulars?
The individual, which is also a
You.
universal.
You mean
You're
you.
right. That's right. That's what spirit is.
Okay, yeah, you're a solipsist.
No,
Yeah,
not a solipsist.
yeah,
No,
because if I disagree with you on that statement, you couldn't disagree because
because think
because
about
there's
logic is objective and universal. It's what connects us. So you have to have the logic there in order to have
Not
agreement on
universal.
anything.
There's different forms of logic. It's not universal.
That's right. That's why I'm talking about the universal logic, the
There
true
is
universal.
no universal logic. That's a
Well, then you
claim you
don't believe
keep
in God,
making,
then.
but you haven't explained. What is
You're
what are
an
the
atheist.
laws?
You don't even know it.
What are the laws of universal logic?
Let's say again.
What are the laws of universal logic?
The laws of universal logic is sublation and concrete speculative thought. So if you think in
That is
abstract,
correct.
you'll never get the spirit, right? So we have to first of
No.
all teach what abstraction is, because evil is one-sidedness. That's how you know when you're in the spirit. So if you see one-sidedness in an abstract way, that's one criterion of truth. That's where ignorance comes from. You have to think on the full spectrums of things and stop in this abstract opposition, which makes you hate your enemy instead of love them. So sublation is where you love your enemy logically, but you do it universally, not in the naive, just faith-based way, because that's just tolerance. You have to do it in your being and your thinking, faith and in spirit. And I think that's what's missing.
So how are these universal then?
Because they apply everywhere in sensuous reality, because they're timeless and spaceless.
Demonstrate it. That's what we've been asking you the entire time. Can you demonstrate that this logic that you claim is universal logic, you claim that it's not the logic that Jim Bob and I know, but is some type of new form of logic? And when we ask you to explain what it is, you did give us an explanation. I'll give you that. But now we just want you to demonstrate that explanation.
I did, but it's really hard to do from ordinary thinking. You guys have the universal logic in you, but it's only implicit.
Let's ask a different question, Spirit Man, just to get you off the hook here. Does sublation, and the other thing you mentioned, sublimation or sublation?
Sublation.
Sublation. Do those things follow a law beyond themselves?
That's the thing, is anything that is rationally demonstrated in terms of what you just said, Andrew, anything that is really true is self-grounding. That means that it has nothing outside of itself. It only needs itself to circle back and ground its own self.
No, Gödel debunked that mathematically.
He debunked a sensuous version of math, but math isn't the living logic in itself. It has to be the universal, infinitely logical math.
Great. So let me ask you a question. Does 2 + 2 always equal 4?
If you define it, if you self-determine it that way, that's an
Well,
agreement.
I'm asking
that is
you, within the bounds of your universal logic, does 2 + 2 always equal 4?
within the agreed symbological, within the agreed symbology of ring theory that you and I share, yes, that's what's objective between me and your subjectivity.
So,
in terms of objective
logic mathematic based or no?
Wow, that's part of it. It's a moment, but the true logic is the genuine infinite. That's the being of God.
Hold on. Genuine infinite. Could you discern genuine infinite without appealing to a law that's preconditioned for discerning the infinite?
Well, yeah, pure being. So that's the beginning.
No, that's just pushing the button.
Well, that's not a law.
You're just kicking it back, right?
It is.
You would have to abide by a law to know pure being. To discern
the law is that you don't have any law. That's the first law, is that there is no. You cancel all law. The canceling of all law results in the first law.
And you're okay with saying
that's
that.
the contradiction.
So wait. Again, a contradiction. The first law is there is no law. The first law is there is no law. Is there no law? There's the first law that is there is no law. Right?
The first law is
infinite regress infinitely on the laws being no laws, being laws that there are no laws.
Marin, do you understand the problem here is that if you say sublation is the first law, right?
No, I didn't say it was the first law.
Or whatever. You said it's a law,
You guys are putting words into my mouth because you're coming at it abstractly.
No. Andrew asked you what the laws of logic were, and you said sublimation. You
the
named
laws
it first.
Of logic.
You named
the
it
laws
first.
of logic. Go ahead.
You said the reason I said first is because it's the first thing you named after the question, what are the laws of logic? You said sublation, right? Sublation. I asked, is there anything that needs to be the case lawfully for you to even determine what that word is?
And I said pure being because all definitions are referring back to previous words to define them, right?
So pure being doesn't require law of identity, law of non-contradiction, excluded middle, language, meaning, information, none of it?
No, because for us to know it, yes. But for it to know it in itself, no. Because it's pure immediate indeterminacy. In itself, it doesn't need any of that stuff because it thinks its own being. You and I need that to know it, right? But that's external knowledge. Knowledge that is truly defined thinks its own being. That's why ontology and epistemology are one, but only in God's mind. That's the universal scientific.
Ontology and epistemology are two very different things.
They are to us, but when God's thinking itself, God thinks its own being immediately.
You don't know how God thinks.
Well, if you understand the universal logic and you take
you can't understand the universal logic because it doesn't make any sense. You created a contradiction within your universal logic because you said that there's a law that there is no laws.
Right.
If you claim that there's a law that there is no law, then there is a law that claims there is no law. Do you understand that?
I would say that you're
tell me what is an infinite regress?
An infinite regress is where you just keep referring other things and you don't get to an actual root foundational thought.
Right. So is a law, if you claim that there's a law that there are no laws, right? Aren't you creating an infinite regress?
Well, what I think I actually said was the first law is the canceling of all laws that you think you know. But I mean,
the first what is the what?
The first what? The first law is canceling the law you just declared as a law?
Yeah, the first law is to kind of do what Savaya said, is that if you think you know it already, you already don't know it.
So you have to cancel that too, right? You have to cancel that too, right? So where are you? Epistemic nihilism, endless regress. That's what Andrew just said.
Well, that's where you start, right? That's why God thinks its own self.
No, you don't. You don't start with epistemic nihilism.
You do. You have to, because you can't assume anything. You can't even assume God, because if you assume God, you don't know God. You have to know God for yourself.
Yeah, how do you know God?
If you constantly have to assume it, you can never know.
Yet another claim that starts from something.
Yeah, how do you know him?
How do you from this sinful world?
How do you know God?
I know. Let's go ahead.
How do you know God, Spirit Man?
I think I have I have a coherent model that corresponds to reality more than it did before. I'm still learning.
You have a coherent model which appeals to the laws of logic, not laws of sublation or anything else.
The living logic, not the dead.
Hold on. You just said you had a coherent worldview. We've demonstrated maybe 19 times self-refuting statements, in contradictory statements, endless regress, circularity.
They look circular.
No, they are. They're just complete rubbish.
Our truth is self-grounding, so it is circular, but not in the wrong way that you guys are talking about. Infinite regress stops with pure being, and then it circles back around and grounds itself through absolute spirit. That's the only circular logic that is true. The Alpha and the Omega. The Bible says it.
Okay. So hold on.
Alpha and the Omega. Wait, that's circular. How's that circular?
Huh?
How is alpha and omega circular?
Because the alpha becomes the omega that creates its own alpha again. It's a
No,
circle.
that's
The alpha
ridiculous.
and the omega are the same, but
Hang on,
different.
let me ask you a question. Are you tall and also a man?
Depends.
Well,
Depends on what you mean by man,
yeah.
you know.
Okay, so let's
How do
say,
you define it?
okay,
I
so
was saying space-time.
I'll make it a little bit easier. Let's say in your country, 5 foot tall is the standard for men, and you're 5'6", and anybody who's 5'6" is referred to as tall. And
Yeah,
you
that's
are a male biologically. Can you be a male who's also tall?
Sorry, I didn't think when you made the comparison, I thought you were making an opposition, but you were comparing two different concepts. You're right in the first example. I thought you said, "Are you tall or are you short?" And then would have got into relativity of standards. But you said, "Are you man
Yeah,
and
I'm
tall?"
not getting into any of
So
that.
I'm like, if you have standards, for those, then yes, you can be those.
Two things at the same time and it not be circular.
Or contradiction.
In this temporal world, you have to have
I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking if you can be two things at the same time without it being circular. Can you be a tall man?
Can you be a tall man and not have it be circular? I don't know why that would be circular in the first
You're
place.
right. It wouldn't be circular at all.
Yeah.
So you can be the alpha and omega, and it doesn't need to be circular at all. You haven't explained to us how that's circular logic, that God is both the alpha and the omega. What is the alpha and omega mean?
Let me just
hang on real quick. We're going to let Spirit Man answer this question, and then we have to go into closing statements. So
okay, ahead. Thank you, guys. And maybe Sava, I don't know if you want to chip in my last part of my answer, but
oh, God,
if there's anything outside of God, if there's anything outside of God, including its own beginning, it's not God. Everything has to be included in God, including its own beginning.
Is God an it?
Huh?
Is God an it?
God depends, because the way you think about the logic, you can attach categories. So the male energy can be attached to the first abstract moment of understanding.
Because you said truth grounds itself. Therefore, truth is independent of God.
No.
So what's it and what's God? What's the truth and what's God? Are they separate?
Well, this is about knowledge. So God knows itself perfectly, immediately, in immediate knowledge. But in terms of external knowledge, that's spirit. That's the it you're talking about.
So God is an it. So God is an it to you.
No, spirit could be an it, because spirit is knowledge.
Is God an it? Simple yes or no.
How do you define the it, though?
Now, okay, I'm sorry. We can't do it. I'm sorry, guys. We can't do that. Okay, so I'm not.
If you want the masculine God.
No, hang on. So we have to go into closing statements, guys. It's been an hour and a half. It was a good debate. I enjoyed it. We have.
Did you? Okay, good.
There will be more back and forth when we get to Q&A and such, but. So the way I want to do this, because last word obviously gets a rhetorical advantage, I don't want one side to be too lopsided. So what we'll go Andrew, then Spirit Man, then Jim Bob, then Savaya. So Andrew, you started off with your closing
But I'm now Spirit Man. I've achieved it throughout this debate. Yeah. So I'm going next.
So I did enjoy the debate, and I do want to thank both my opponents for coming on. I do think it was spirited. And we need to have more of these kinds of discussions across the board. Which is why when people say things like, oh, it's insane that you bring these different circles in and have engagement with them, that's what the Crucible is about. We do have brutal debates, and then we have intellectual debates. We have everything across the board. And so I did want to take a second to thank both of you guys for coming on. Now, that said, I need to shit all over them real quick. Let me just express my disdain and disappointment, because I was right in my opening statement that this is just the typical shamanism, spiritualism, except in this case, Spirit Man obviously has a little bit of pedigree in philosophy, but it doesn't really hold up, because he appeals to actual logic, and he has created a new form of logic in which creates infinite regresses. Those are fine. Contradictions, those are fine. Almost everything within the realm of the new logic is contrary to the realm of the logic that we understand, which is how we truly tend to interpret the world in a much broader basis. Now, logic is not universal. Reason, I think, is probably universal, and I'd be happy to have that debate as well. I think that reason is necessary to human existence. If we didn't have reason, we couldn't do anything. But most people are illogical. I mean, come on. The laws of logic are not only not universal, but generally require formal training for you to actually understand how they work. And it's taken thousands of years of refinement to get there. This new form of logic that has been postulated has not actually been fleshed out. And when it's questioned, what it all it does is basically state this: all of the rules of formal logic are out. Those are, infinite regresses are fine. Contradictions are fine. You can be God, that's fine. You cannot be God, that's fine. It's almost an anything goes jamboree. Jim Bob pointed out many things multiple times, but the one that he really kind of drove down on is on the presuppositions, and especially the statement of I'm going to presuppose my own presuppositions and then not account for those presuppositions. You just need to believe them, is absolute insanity. As we walk through the mysticism, this is not new, by the way, as much as they want to kind of act like this is new. It's a new logic. It's a new this. This is spiritualism and New Agery 101. These are not the first sophists who have engaged in diversion and not answering questions and making sure that they do everything but give you an answer to what it is that you're being asked. Not to say that maybe there wasn't points that we were evasive. Maybe there were, but if you stack them, boy, side by side, it's not even close. So I would still like to note this one pivotal thing, which is I still have no idea what these guys believe. I still, right this second, don't actually know what their core principles are, what it is that they're after, what their objectives are, or what their core beliefs are. I still don't know that. And I don't think anybody in the audience knows it. I don't think my partner knows it. I don't think the moderator knows it. I don't think God knows. Well, God, I'm sorry. He's the one person who does. I got caught up with myself because I was almost convinced that I could be him by my opponents, but then my rationality came back into play. And with that, I'll yield my time.
Okay, and we will go into Spirit Man next. Go ahead.
Do I just get 7 minutes, or how long are these?
Yeah, 7 minutes, and whenever you're ready.
So gracious. This is a great meta, actually. I really appreciate you leaving off with Savaya. That was an awesome balance. Okay. I totally understand your point of view, Andrew. It's hard. That's where I was when I first started learning this kind of universal perspective. The Bible makes so much more sense now, because most people who think scientifically just negate the Bible. It's called an abstract negation. But when you understand the living logic that's underneath the parables, the Bible's actually organized in a contingent human way. But once we understand the universal principles underneath them, I think that we can understand the true order of the Bible outside of human sin that put it together as the Council of Nicaea or whatever. I think that there's an incredible truth to it that is being missed, because what we're trying to show, the true nature of divine knowledge, doesn't fit into sinful thought. So if you're still stuck in abstract thinking, one-sided thinking is the criterion of evil, basically, to answer your question, Jim Bob. This dialectical two-sided thinking, the full spectrum and the sublation, the transcendence of that with logic, is the true way to think if you're going to get in the living spirit beyond these oppositions where enemies hate each other. True Christians don't think that way. They see these oppositions as a harmony in the right order. That's what righteousness is supposed to be, and it's really hard for abstract thinking to break out of it. That's why everything that I've said to you looks like it doesn't make any sense. For instance, you're saying that we embrace contradictions. We do and we don't. The Bible is said to be contradictory. If you look at a lot of abstract atheists, they look at the Bible and say the whole thing is just pure contradictions and circular logic. But the truth is, real universal logic is circular, but not in an arbitrary, finite way. What I'm trying to show in this dialogue, whether I'm doing a good job or a bad job, and there's at least 2 people in the chat that can see what I'm doing, right? I need to perfect my skill, but we're on at least a new trajectory. Something new is happening here, even if I'm bad at explaining it. I think people who intrinsically have the spirit in them can recognize the concreteness of what I'm saying, that this self-determining, this being in itself, this sort of circularity that makes sense in righteousness, this sort of living logic, not the dead logic. And you said, Andrew, that we throw out all the rules of logic that we have today, throw them completely out. No, that's you abstracting what I said. True universal living logic takes the principles that we have today. They're called the dead bones of logic. They exist in abstraction. We don't get rid of them. What we're doing is we're taking them and we're putting them in their living order, and we're connecting them instead of being separate about them. So when I'm using this logic, I'm doing it in a way that's really unfamiliar. So we aren't getting rid of logic. We're putting it in its proper living spirit, how Jesus would have did logic if he would have wrote it down, for instance, or Buddha, or anybody who understood the living nature of things. When we say life, we don't just mean life in terms of sensuous reality, plants, animals, whatever. The logic itself that determines your true thinking, true reasonable thinking, as you said, Andrew, is not just in your actual human thinking, it's in your being. When you are being true in the spirit, your being is also true. And it's in this universal living logic, which fuels reason. If I was to ask you what reason is, you wouldn't really know, but reason is the self-consciousness of the universal logic in space-time. That's what reason is. So without logic, you can't have reason. So you're not making much sense. To me, my perspective, those two are connected. But pure logic thinks its own self, and then you come later to reflect on it as external knowledge. That's the it of spirit in space-time. So these things are really unfamiliar, and I totally understand if it doesn't make sense at first, but there's a proper way to do contradictory logic, circular logic. These types of things are true, but you have to do them in this proper way. And I might not be doing a good job showing you guys. Maybe Jesus would have done a better job. But I think if we go through the Bible and we take this logic, we line it up, it would be in there, because that's why the Bible has persisted for 2,000 years. It's because the universal logic is in it. It's just in sensuous form. That's all, parable. If we put it in the scientific form, the metaphysical, infinite science, where it's coherent in itself, God's thinking itself perfectly, eternally, all the time, right? That part of the moment, the Father, that is true. But God, Jesus came and he said that you can know it. That's what he did. And he says, if you understand what I understand and you know the truth, the way, and the life, you will do as I have done. You too will be the children of God, and you will rise to the spirit. And I'm trying to show what that looks like beyond just faith. You start with faith, and it gives you the courage to try and do what I'm explaining. But if you want to break out the abstract Christian spirit where we're negating each other, like this is not the true Christian spirit. I think me and Savaya, even though he's a mystic, are actually embodying this living logic because we want to love you, not just tolerate you. But you guys are cutting us off 10,000 times because you don't really want to know what we're saying. You want to be right. And that's the wrong kind of righteousness. Sublation is the spirit we're trying to show. It's like, I want to know what you're really saying. I want to know how you define that word. I want to, so I can meet you where you are. I might have did a bad job. I screwed up twice. I know that already. So I will improve for next time. And if you guys have me back on, I will definitely talk more about the practicals on how the spirit relates to Wiwa, paying people better, working together in a non-alienated spirit, and then talking a little bit more about the elixir of life, because it really is, this technology is like really, we need to have this kind of wisdom.
You are welcome back on, by the way.
Thank you so much, guys.
Of course.
Lots more to say.
People who come on the Crucible in good faith, regardless of their beliefs, we always have them back on. There's probably tons of debaters who would like to challenge you. Of course, you're welcome back on.
I feel blessed. Thanks, guys. I guess that's my summary. Lots more to talk about.
Yeah, like I said, there will likely be more back and forth when we get to Q&A. Jim Bob, you're up next. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was trying to just get to what is coherent. That's the kind of nature of this debate. And if your opponent is saying my worldview is coherent, but I also can violate all of these laws. I can violate non-contradiction, law of identity, these kinds of things. How could you determine what's coherent if you could actually just eliminate the very standard to determine what's coherent is a part of your worldview? There's nowhere you can go. I mean, from what I heard, there was so much there. There was, you get to God by negating everything, but also you get to God and spirit through the scientific method. He said you could use the scientific method and do that methodology on metaphysics, which he did not explain. It was almost as if like I sent a teenager into like one of those like DMT retreats, and then he came out and I gave him a box of crayons to go write on a rock. It was like the reason you're getting cut off, right, is that I'm not going to let people argue against what I believe is the knowledge of God. You believe you have the knowledge of God, right? You believe you have the methodology. You appeal to the Bible in your own very specific mystical way. You're appealing to all sorts of things throughout the debate. You referred to God as an it. Well, problem with that is that if God is an it, then you know God as an it in its wholeness, right? You know that it's an it. Well, how do you know it's an it? Well, you don't even have to know it's an it, right? You can know it's an it, but not know it's an it. You can contradict yourself and not contradict yourself. You can do both, everything, all the time, right? I'm sitting and standing also. It's just all in your mind. This kind of nonsense needs to be battled out, highlighted, and rejected wholesale, passionately. And so I hope the chat got that. I hope with very simple questions, with this kind of stuff, everything sounds approachable theoretically. Most things are. I don't even think your worldview was approachable theoretically, let alone practically. It's so misguided. You can't ground any odds. Your worldview couldn't even ground us, that why it's wrong for us to interrupt you constantly, right? You couldn't even get there. Why? Because if we assumed knowledge of spirit in your worldview, you couldn't tell which one of us was right and wrong at any given point. And we ask you, how do you determine the difference between a spirit, the godly spirit, which is just spirit man, obviously, and the demonic spirit, which I bet if we pushed him on, he would eventually say he's both the demonic and the good spirit at the same time. The thing is with these worldviews, right? They're so magical that you can just keep reinventing. Now, another problem was I asked him what the laws of logic were. He stated sublation, right? Like a floaty, ethereal concept. And I simply asked, is there anything that needs to be true lawfully for you to determine what is considered sublation itself as a concept, right? In other words, for you to appeal to some concept, right, as a law, if it's not absolutely circular, I permit circularity, by the way, logic, I permit the circularity of logic, meaning, words, these kinds of things, the value of numbers. But the problem with your appeal to circularity is you made sublation identical to lawfulness of logic. But I've demonstrated that in order for you to even know what sublation is, you have to assume a bunch of other things lawfully in thought, law of identity. You have to assume you're not me. You have to assume there's something that's not sublation. You have to assume that there's an external world that's not identical to your mind, right? You have to get to all of these patterns. You have to appeal to universals and particulars, ises and is nots. There's a whole level of things that you're just assuming before you even determine the concept. Now, the laws of logic, law of identity, excluded middle, and non-contradiction are the fundamental laws that we appeal to when we're in conversation or even navigating the world. So when we bring this up and we ask you, what are your laws of logic? If you don't refer to those three, you're definitely assuming those three first. So whatever you say that's not those things, you're assuming all of those things before you even get to another metaphysical concept, term, whatever, abstraction. So the other problem was you said negation. You get to negation, right? As Andrew pointed out, you get rid of presuppositions in all knowledge, yet you have full knowledge of this path, right? You're basically like a computer game. Your worldview is like a computer game that assumes it can delete all of its internal knowledge and come to the fullness of the computer game, which no longer exists, by the way, but you know it, but you somehow have access to it. This is nonsensical. Right. I don't know how many psychedelic drugs you've done. I'm not trying to poison the well or make a judgment. It's just that this kind of thinking seems to be kind of in this sort of new age Gnostic mix. It's like a grab from the bundle at the Walmart theology, the theology, the Walmart theology, and go through the lane and throw anything that sounds good into your basket. And then when you get pushed on it, you just say, well, I don't really need the basket or the box, or I don't need language. I don't need anything to know anything. I just in spirit, right? I just need spirit. And we ask, what's spirit? It just pushes the can down the road to another thing that we're going to be asking, what's that? And that seemed to be my experience tonight. So I fully reject both of your worldviews. I don't even think they're compatible. I'm willing to do a round two where you present why elixir, right? The globe. Let's just lay off that topic for a second. I'd be interested to see why you believe that's good, right? Why that's a good thing that we all to pursue that technology, and how you're going to be able to ground that in your incoherent worldview.
All right. Thank you for that closing statement. And last but not least, we're going to go to Savaya. You've got 7 minutes on the clock. Whenever you're ready. I I don't know if I'm crazy.
Nope, you're
but-
fine.
Okay.
He's holding space.
You're gonna get kicked, dude. Like,
Okay.
I'm just telling you. Like, you got to make a closing statement here.
In that silence, people might say there's nothing. But frankly, there are ancient traditions from all over the world that have esteemed that there is a whole lot in the emptiness between all of us. And what I experienced tonight was, well, I'm thankful that we were able to say something, and I'm interested always in hearing the other side. But I felt like it was difficult to really feel a deep connection. And that's okay. But I feel like the epitome of the human experience is to like feel a deep, intimate love. Well, a sense that we can work together and use the similarities that we have, our perspectives that we have, that are able to give people a sense that we do live in a better world, or a world in which there is more ways we can interact with each other. People will say, oh, this is simplistic thinking. And when I referenced children earlier, children, yes, may always be thinking, and they need to be taught like what the world's like so that they don't get, perpetrated on, trampled, and all the other things that our world is known for. But there's a part of children that lives in mystery. It has adventure. And our world has lost a big part of how vast our experience can be by stimulating a sense, an unknown sense, in which the world in which we think we know by terms and definitions, labels and thought and ideologies and all whatever you want to call, may not actually be the ultimate requisite for really being with each other in this grand experience that we call life. I might not call it life. I might not call myself a mystic. I might, say whatever. But I don't think there is an ultimate system that we can describe to other people in which will determine a consecutive, verifiable state in which we all can live happily ever after. And I find that this sublation thing, it does interest me, but I may not know all the terms and conditions of the Hegelian method and all of its, synchronicities, but I feel like we all have an inherent desire to kind of bring out the best in each other. And our world is filled with like all sorts of chaos, and it sounds like this is simplistic thinking circling itself again, but I stand the reason that there are ways and methods that may not be defined by Hegel solely, but by other people who may not even know what they're talking about, And sometimes I say that, like, I don't know what I'm talking about sometimes, or sometimes I want to kill myself because, that happens to all of us, but I don't. I don't want to deplatform you guys. I'm in a healthy state of mind right now, I would say, because I don't want to do that.
I don't mean you to cut in on your closing statement, but no killing yourself ever. That's never. Right?
Well, of course, we would want that for everyone. Well,
but especially you.
Yeah.
Because not everybody brought it up, but you brought it up. So no, none of that.
But I'm sure in some way, a lot of us have thought about that. And I think we want to get past this sense of not feeling able to connect with a deep part of the world, but the enigma. I know I'm going to be running low on time now soon, but the enigma, the mystery, the unknown aspect has not been so brought into our upbringing that gives us mystery and adventure and all sorts of ways of maneuvering the real world with a sense of lightheartedness. Because what is this world really? We're all energy, vibrating waves that are the byproduct of whether the Big Bang or the spoken word of let there be light. Whatever we want to believe, we are a speck of dust, and we could be very well more than a speck of dust. But whatever, I think not so much that what I think is so important, but the intention to see the opposites, the extremes that seem to lead us to want to continue the same old patterns of what we think we must do in response to the chaos, the fascism, the extremism, the absurd demonism that runs rampant throughout the land. I just think that maybe some of us would be better if we just took more time to not think so often. Maybe there might be some magic there.
All right.
So I have to. The moderator will allow. I don't want to derail anything, but Savaya, are you in an okay mental state? No, I mean this earnestly, and I can speak on behalf of my partner too. We certainly don't want to see you hurt yourself in any way ever.
I'm fine now.
Well, I mean, are you?
I am.
All right.
I probably wouldn't be able to be here.
Yeah, he's good, guys. Savaya, you're a beautiful spirit that's hard for people to understand. So you're holding great space and the positive love. People in the chat are saying you're very loving and you're holding the vibe. So it's hard for people to understand you, but I'm in your corner, man. I know you're doing well. So yeah, guys, it's hard to understand, but I love Savaya and he's doing well.
Okay, so that was it for closing statements. And if you guys aren't familiar, people that are new here, the way we do it at the Crucible is after the closing statements have been completed, we consider the debate to be over. Not that there's not going to be any more back and forth, but we're going to move into Q&A. And part of Q&A, the moderators interact a little bit. We ask questions of our own. So my point of being unbiased has now ended. So now I'm going to be engaging in some questions of my own. We're going to get to super chats. We do have a couple of callers. I want to remind everybody, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out in the algorithm. Also, send in your super chats for the Q&A. Those will take priority, and we have a lot in line. So get them in early so that we have enough time to get them all in before we're here all night. Just a quick question for our Spirit Man. For myself, I'm asking you, is there... what is it that makes something false for Spirit Man?
It's the second moment of logic. So where I screwed up earlier, where I could have did a better job, because I'm still learning the speculative logic, guys. It's incredible. But there's three, like when Jim Bob asked me what is true, what's the moments of logic, there's 3 moments of logic technically. And it's not necessarily the 3 that he said, but those are involved. So the first moment of logic is abstract understanding, which turns itself into the second moment, which is the moment of process, the moment of the particular. So this is the abstract universal to the particular, like Jim was mentioning. And then that kind of like turns into sublation, or the third moment, which is the concrete universal that absorbs that negation. If you are stuck in that second moment, if you're stuck in that second moment, that is the moment of finitude, untruth. That's the moment we have one-sidedness warring with itself. The harmonizing concrete universal is the next moment. But that middle moment of logic is when you know that there's a falsity, because the second one-sidedness is just a sort of receptacle for the pure being to mirror itself. And when it sees its own reflection, that's when it is different and the same at the exact same time, and you race to a higher identity. So the laws of logic that Jim made, just one thing, the law of identity, the law of excluded metal, those three laws of thought are included in this universal logic, but they're included way later. You can't assume them in the beginning, even though they're happening implicitly. So explicitly,
would you say that what makes something false is something that is negated within the proposition, or like it's negated by some external factor in that moment?
It is the true universals in the other side aren't recognized. So yeah, so for instance, even appearance, like appearance, our perceptions are actually false. That's why Buddha and Jesus said the world is not the truth. It's just a world of appearance. So that's because it's the second moment. This world is the second moment of universal logic. We don't think about it that way, but it is. This is the particularity of the universals. So that's why our world is false. But inside our world is the concrete universal, but you have to go inwards to see it. That's why Jesus said you have to go inwards.
Not gonna lie, man. I don't know what the fuck you're saying at all. Like,
I know.
All right, so
well, can I ask? Can I, if
okay,
I can get in just for a second, moderator? I was just wondering, can you summarize what you think makes something not true in just 3 sentences?
So what makes something not true is when it's not coherent in the whole and the universals don't correspond to themselves. So what I mean by that is when you consider the other as separate from your own truth, that's a one-sidedness that makes the other always separate from you, which makes it untrue.
Okay, so you did it in 2 sentences.
No,
so
that was not to me, 2 sentences, but fair, fair enough. It was a better summary.
So, yeah, well, where I was gonna go, where I wanted to, another question I wanted to ask is, like, Jim Bob mentioned in his opening about metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics.
I got it. Sorry, I got it. What you determine as true is in the form of the notion, and the notion has 3 elements always in that order. If they're not 3 elements in that universal particular individual in that order in a concrete whole, that's when something is true logically. So that's the actual Hegelian answer. That's what I'm trying to approximate. I just realized, but that's it. You have to say it in its notion, and that notion means that you get beyond the one-sidedness. Right.
So what I was gonna go was when Jim Bob mentions metaphysics, epistemology, and your ethics. I think something that was not touched on at all. You guys were mostly just discussing metaphysics and epistemology in this debate, and I thought it was, again, very entertaining. I did enjoy the discussion, but something that I think you guys never really touched was like the ethics, the morals, and I guess my question would be, like, if I grant you every standard of truth and every standard of logic and all these things, is there any reason why I ought follow it? Like, if you, Spirit Man, are to convince me, Zen Shapiro, why I ought follow the standards of logic that you're setting forth, what's the reason?
It's like everything that we see that's a particular, if it is logically coherent, it has the same pattern in it, and it's always reoccurring. Christians think it's God, right? God's thinking is perfect. So when you align with the goodness, you become good. So it's just repeating all over all the time. And so I think that the ought that you're talking about, it's hard to describe. Like, this is what Savaya struggles with as a mystic. Like, in order for me to explain it, I have to start with words you don't understand, because the whole, you have to have the whole before you have the parts. Like, it's this weird contradiction. But I would say that I know it sounds like the logic. I know it sounds like the logic. Like, well, you're assuming the whole. But what I mean is, the truth develops in the Trinitarian way. So they're all trinities all the way up. So even morality is a trinity. So morality is actually the second moment of the true logic. So the true notion of morality is it's the moment of process, which doesn't make any sense to you because you have to understand the whole framework. But let me explain it to you. So morality doesn't occur in the metaphysical realm because it's perfect there. Morality only exists for us. And the universal is perfect logic coming through us is what we interpret as reasonableness, which is morality. That's what Andrew was talking about. But to say it in a way
like I'm asking you, why should I care? Why should I follow that? That's my
because
question.
this is the thing that unifies
Because
all of
the
us.
first rule of Logic Club is there's no rules to Logic Club.
Didn't Jeffrey Dahmer have his own reasons to eat brain custard?
Universal logic is shared, though. It's all of our kind of reasons, but not groupthink necessarily. This is the truth in all things. So your particular will, whatever you want to do, is not the true logic. It's just abstract. It's caprice. It's abstract freedom, not real freedom.
If I want to eat brain custards, is it logical to kill someone and eat brain custard?
That's particular logic, but universal logic means self-recognition with the other. So if you don't want to be eaten and killed, then you won't do it to others.
What if I want to be?
If you want to be, I don't think that's really logical. I actually don't think that Hegel would say that that's
by universal logic, or by the laws of logic, or by which logic?
You just said that's the standard for what's logical, and I just used it against itself, and you said that's not logical.
Well, I think so. You're right. So I'm getting to this closer definition where actually, when you are connected to this universal logic, you want to do something where you're idealizing yourself. So you're less, like there's two sides of you. There's your lesser self, your carnal sinful self, and then there's the spirit self of you. So you're right. If you make choices out of this lesser self, which is the one-sided ignorance, that's not the kind of self-recognition we're talking about. That's particular self-recognition, which I did actually mention before. We're talking about universal self-recognition in the spirit. And that kind of recognition doesn't usually lead you to that sort of self-devouring. It leads you into an expanding. So that's what I would kind of say. I tried to preface it before, but
Dude, I just have to emphasize this, Spearman. I have no idea what the fuck you're saying. I literally cannot. I literally, I don't get it at all.
It's really on a different level. It takes work, and I mean, I was there too, guys. Like, let me just preface this a little bit more.
Wait, you're at the point you got somewhere right now. You're representing the conclusion.
Yeah,
I'm not going where you're at ever.
Well, hold on. When I started reading this guy Hegel, right, I actually didn't like him at all. I've been studying philosophy for 20 years, and he came across my path twice, and I was like, this guy is just he's just an obscurist that's trying to sound smart and confuse people with contradictions. So I didn't grasp what he was saying the first two times because I felt the same way you guys did. It doesn't. When you read a paragraph of Hegel straight,
before you were retarded,
it doesn't make any sense.
Is that back before you were? I mean, come on, man. Like, you can't be embracing you're throwing out every law of logic, saying that they're all worthless for this new universal law of logic, which has no. Yes, it is what you're saying.
You're saying it's okay to be contradictory.
How many times?
It is, but it's the kind of circularity that you were talking about, Jim Bob.
No. Circularity isn't necessarily contradictory.
Well, exactly. So how do you explain it? Because it'll get closer to the truth. How would you explain it?
If you say, I have no presuppositions, that's a presupposition. Okay, in simple form, right? You're saying get to nothing, right? But to say you got to nothing is to know something, and you can't get to nothing.
No. You're right. So I'm not saying that. You're right. So I'm not being clear. I'm not saying that you know that you have no presuppositions. If you do it right, you actually are presuppositionless, but you're right. You're assuming that you know. But if you do it right, and that's the hard part, if you do it right, you are supposed to end up in a space where there's no knowledge. You're supposed to, whether I'm explaining it properly or not. That's why you're not getting to nothing. This is less than nothing. Nothing, you have to have knowledge. You have to have knowledge of something to have nothing. This is less. This is pure indeterminacy. There's nothing to compare it to. This is like beyond the duality model. Sheer abstraction not even an abstraction of anything. It's just pure
bullshit.
It's called impossible.
It's called bullshit.
It's called logically.
Look, there's a layman for this. It's called bullshit.
Let me finish.
Listen, dude. I would consider myself a philosophy bro who's like really into this stuff. I think Jim Bob is too. Andrew is like vaguely into that. Dude, like honestly, like I have no clue how to grasp. Like bullshit is a good way to sum it up. Like I don't know what the fuck.
Okay, wait. Let me make it. That's
what I'm interpreting.
I know. Let me make it a little bit more concrete. So you're right. If you try and hold sheer indeterminacy in your brain, it's impossible for us. So you're right. What happens is as soon as you end up there, if you try to get there, if you try to think it at all, immediately just trying to think it turns it into pure nothing. So that's how Hegel resolves that contradiction. I think it's beautiful. I think it's brilliant. Because if you don't do that, anything else introduces an external presupposition that's not internal to that presupposition. And that's where I decided to start listening to Hegel. It's like, oh my goodness, when it clicked for me, it broke me out of the ordinary thinking for a second. I was like, whoa. And it sounds really weird, guys, but it is this process of building. And this guy in the chat said, I'm becoming. Yeah, once you try and think pure being, you can't do it. It turns itself into pure nothing. And then we try and hold pure nothing. It's a contradiction again. You have to have pure being to have that. So they go back and forth instantly. And when you realize that those two things are separate but the same, that's what pure becoming is.
Here's the problem with the view. The moment you start teaching this view, you're contradicting yourself.
Well, kind of, but you can't get rid of contradiction.
Kind of, like, no, not kind of, fully.
Well, explain it. How would you interpret it in terms of your way?
Because you're teaching the opposition and negation of knowledge, and your teleological priority is to negate telos itself. So it's another contradiction.
Yeah.
You're getting to nowhere, which is nowhere, right? This is utopia. This is actually the meaning of the word utopia. It's not an accident that your view is incoherent utopianism, and then suddenly your outcome in the world to represent your broken view is a utopian notion, which means nowhere.
Okay, you're kind of right. You're right. So let me explain. I want to understand how you interpret what I'm about to say. So let me explain the kind of story version of it, and then you tell me logically how it hits you.
I don't know if we can do. I don't know if we can go into story time.
No. But what I mean is, like, instead of the demonstrative,
we got multiple callers. We got a lot of.
Okay, wait. Can I take 30 seconds just to finish that?
Okay. Yes, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
So how it's supposed to go is you're supposed to just do the Socratic moment that you don't know anything unless you know everything. So what you're supposed to say is, okay, how do I start without making an assumption? And you say, well, I can't assume that my feeling works. I can't assume space-time. I can't assume any of my senses. I can't assume any of that. So if you do all that infinitely, you're supposed to get to indeterminacy. And whether I'm explaining it properly or not, the only presupposition that's not a presupposition is just not knowing anything at all, which you can't hold. That's the contradiction. As soon as you try and hold that state, it turns into knowledge. So I'm trying to make that happen, but you might have to read it for yourselves and then explain it to me later, Jim. I would love for you to read it and tell me how.
And we're happy, of course, on the Crucible to facilitate such a second debate, if such is what you guys want. Again, you guys have been good sports. Nobody's angry at you. It was at times a contentious debate, but I'm always happy to have those debates, even with what you might call the fringes of the internet. So I'm very grateful you guys came on.
And last question from me, and then we're going to go into callers. We're going to go to super chats after that. And this... I hope it's simple, and I hope there's no offense taken. Has Spirit Man and Tavai, are you guys currently, or have you ever been prescribed antidepressants?
No.
Okay, that was just out of curiosity. And then last question out of curiosity: do either of you identify in the LGBTQ category?
I'm a heterosexual male, identified, but I fully accept LGBTQ as a dialectical speculative phenomena that breaks out of the dichotomous non-Christian spirit of judging people. So the true Christian spirit of sublation understands both the truth of both sides. But I'm cisgendered. I'm male.
Okay, Savaya.
Cisgender is quite the presupposition. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
So the question is, do we identify within the LGBTQ or something?
Yeah, like of any kind.
Okay. I mean, sometimes, and then sometimes I won't.
He's asking if you're gay, bro. Like, just a straight up answer, like, are you gay? That's what he's asking.
Questions.
Like, where you stick your penis.
You don't have to answer either.
Yeah, you don't. But I
mean,
mean, like, it's a straightforward question. It doesn't require like TikTok, blah, blah. Do you have sex with men or don't you? Right? It's pretty easy.
I think we're all having sex right now.
Okay, we'll move on.
At least that's consistent. At least he's being consistent with his view.
This is sex to me. I want to.
Okay, we got to move on. I'm sorry.
So I'm gay, I guess.
All right.
You got me.
It's not. It wasn't a guy. It was genuine curiosity.
That's fine.
Okay, so we're gonna go into callers. Our first caller. What's up, man? You're up.
Look at that hat.
Check.
Wow.
Yep, we hear you. Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought you'd enjoy the big hat.
calm down. We're all having sex right now. I don't want to be disturbed. Okay.
All right. I got 2 shit posts and 1 actual question. So, shit post 1. Jim Bob, your deltoids may be weak, but Zen's traps are weaker.
Yeah,
They
we got
are.
it.
His
Thank
traps
you.
are weak. Fuck your traps, Sin.
All right, you're about to get kicked, dude. You better redeem yourself quickly.
Andrew, shit post number 2. A triangle and a circle is a cone.
Can a triangle be a circle?
In a cone, yes.
No, can a triangle be a circle? Not
In a
not
cone,
can a
yes.
triangle be attached to a circle? Can a triangle be a circle?
It's a cone, man.
A cone is a spiritual synthesis of a circle and a triangle. I think is what
and
he's trying to
besides
say.
that, who
See?
cares anyway? There's no
Jim Bob gets it.
contradiction. Listen, I'm not contradicting myself. There are no contradictions.
Okay. And the actual question is to Spirit Man. Why, when you were digging down on the fruit of the tree of knowledge, you used it as knowledge, but later when Andrew corrected you to be the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you switched over to it being knowledge of evil?
Because as soon as you have any division at all, like to have real knowledge, determinate knowledge, you have to have a split, a difference. So you have to have a subject and an object. But when you have that first moment, those are the first 2 criterions of abstract logic. And the third moment, of course, is the return, which is the kind of the Christian moment or the Buddhist moment or the concretization of that opposition. So the opposition isn't truth. The truth is what Christians would call God, the whole, the concrete whole, where Adam and Eve in the garden are their individual selves as opposition, but they're in a harmonious concrete whole. When you eat from the tree of knowledge, you get that first separation, which is that abstract knowledge, where you get one-sidedness. And the one-sidedness is where evil comes from, because you're only on one side. You don't have the whole truth. So your separation from God is one-sided. You don't recognize yourself in God because you don't have the Spirit. Spirit is self-recognition with God, which is what Jesus did. And so as you're progressing through the abstract knowledge, that moment of separation, you're actually returning. And Spirit is a return, which is what Jesus completed, at least in the first stage, in religious form. But there's a scientific form. Jesus's supersensuous message is what the infinite science would be today if he wouldn't have been killed. And all the gurus are sort of doing that, but nobody's done it in scientific form. So that's all that we're really doing different, is we're just showing parables in this triadic, in the Trinity, basically. But the Trinity lives itself, it grows itself through those 3 laws of logic that Jim Bob mentioned earlier: identity, difference, law of excluded middle, all that. But it does it in its living sublative way. So I'm saying that when you make that separation, that's where good and evil comes from. So as soon as you do that, you're automatically in ignorance.
Spirit Man, can I ask a
That's
question?
why the tree of good and evil is the same as the tree of knowledge.
Have you considered, if you
Not divine knowledge, though, abstract knowledge. Sorry, go ahead.
if you wanted people to understand your worldview better and clearer, have you considered growing a ponytail?
I embrace all particularities, maybe that aren't evil, let's say. But what I think is the problem here, guys, is this stuff is so powerful, and unlike mysticism, which you can't know it, you can only know it intuitively. This stuff you can know. So it's just taking some time to make the words in their proper order, because in order to define a word, I love that you said this, Jim Bob, is that you mentioned that infinite regress isn't in itself bad, but
No, I reject infinite regress.
Okay, so what was the thing that you said before that you accepted?
I said circularity, like saying like logic is circular. Like
Okay.
in order to investigate or challenge logic, you'd be using logic, so it's circular.
Yeah, okay,
but it's not contradictory that it's circular.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's speculative thought. You just said speculative thought in a different way, but when you go to define a word, it references other words, but when you do it properly, it actually eventually comes down to the definition of pure being. So every single word we use in truth always comes down to one being. That's what the Bible is talking about when it all comes down to God, one being, the universal being.
But you said God was an it, not a being. Now he's a being.
Well, the way we define being isn't just sensuous being. What we consider sensuous being here is a version of concretization of being. But true universal pure being is only in itself. It doesn't need anything else outside of it. We are a determinate form of this pure being. The pure being, if you try and look at pure being directly, you can't do it because you're finite and it's infinite. So when you look at pure being directly, it is like the Tao. It is like if you saw it directly, you couldn't even communicate it because it's so infinite. But we are a version of concrete.
We got to get it moving a little bit. So I'm sorry to cut you off, but Lou,
I know it sounds abstract, guys, but it's really profound.
Lou, if you want to bring back one more rejoinder here, we can.
Can it both be crap and profound?
Say again.
Sorry,
I said, can it be crap and profound?
Hang on, I'm sorry. We're both talking at once. We got Jim Bob. I'm sorry. We got to let the caller ask his next question, and then we'll move from there.
Sorry. Yeah, just the follow up to that. Do you think it's possibly deceptive that you're referring to the fruit of knowledge rather than the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil?
Well, I haven't read that story directly in a long time, so you guys are just catching me up on this particularity. I'm totally open to being corrected about your faith. So I must have conflated the two. I thought the tree of knowledge and the tree of good and evil were actually the same tree, but you're saying they're separate in the Garden of Eden?
It's the fruit. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Okay, one. And what was the other thing? Or that was just the one thing that you're...
The other tree is the tree
of life, right? Okay, yeah, I don't think I was conflating them then. So can you just reframe your question now that I understand?
You were. You just cut off the of good and evil. And if you would have actually looked up the verse and completed the sentence, you would have gotten it.
Yeah, so I already clarified that, so I'll just do it one more time. So when you make a division at all, it's simultaneously the moment of knowledge and the moment of good and evil. They're both happening simultaneously at the same time. That's why it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because you can't do one without the other.
Spirit Man, can I ask you an honest question? I just want to see if you give me an honest answer. Have you ever actually read the Bible front to back?
I have to admit, no, but I have read pretty much, I think I have read every major passage except for maybe the stuff in the Old Testament. So some of the Leviticus stuff.
Without that context, maybe you're missing key elements without ever having actually sat down and read it front to back. Do you think that maybe we should be a little more skeptical of your viewpoints when you're challenged on these things and you seem to not understand how they tie in to a coherent Christian worldview?
Well, I think that you don't necessarily have to read the whole Bible to be a good Christian, but theologically, that's what I'm aiming for, and I'm willing to learn more. But I think I know enough about the Bible.
Well, shouldn't you learn more by reading the Bible? Like,
yeah, I do. I man, you have to read the Quran. I have to read so much stuff. It just comes
the Bible. Like if you're engaging on this and saying how these worldviews should coalesce.
For sure, but right? I'm saying that
never read the Bible, don't you think?
No, I've read the Bible. Trust me, hundreds and hundreds of hours. Trust me, I just don't think anybody has read the whole Bible to say, "Oh, okay." You need to have literally the whole thing in mind. I don't think even bishops or anybody.
You know, here's the thing that's funny to me. It's like it's not a hard read. It really is not a hard read. I know because I've read it cover to cover.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. One more time, like, don't you think that when you're tying in these greater esoteric beliefs, that it's going to be harder for us to take you seriously when Lou's a Catholic and he reads the Bible like you can't believe. He's very, let's say, a stalwart in that. And we have many discussions about it, even within our own Discord. I'd like to know, like, how do you think you must sound to him right now, not even knowing what the fuck he's talking about because you've never read the book in which you're referencing in your esoteric guidelines?
So with that one story, the Genesis, yeah, I have read that front to back like multiple times. So on that one story, yeah, I do think I'm qualified to talk about that, except I haven't read it recently, which is what I said. So the exact
self-referencing. It's self-referencing. So
yeah,
Genesis is at one point, Genesis is at 20 points, is at 300, is in every section. So don't you think, though, that you should probably actually read the whole thing?
Well, I'm trying, man. It's just a matter of time. But the self-referentiality is perfect. That's the circularity. That's the true circularity. And for instance, it's like, can you do math?
Self-reference is not circularity. That's insanity. It's just self-referencing. There's no circle.
Well, if you're referencing yourself, that means you're going outside of yourself and then coming back to yourself.
No, that means you have a point of reference. There's no circle. It's a point of reference. It's a line.
It's a mirror. It's a mirror.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
insanity.
But notice what a mirror does. You're referencing something that returns back to you.
Right. No, but you're assuming your interpretation is correct. This is the problem, right? And
well,
so
that's the thing. I'm willing to be corrected. It's the logic, guys. Totally understandable. But think of it this way. It's like I can't do 1 + 1 unless I know a fourth year complex variable analysis.
Yeah, but 1 + 1 doesn't
don't
always
need to know
equal
complex
2
variable
in your
analysis to grasp the basic
2 +
principle.
2 doesn't always equal 2 in your worldview.
We have to move on, guys. I'm sorry.
I hope that makes sense. Thanks for your great question. I'll try and do better next time.
Lou, you can leave us with words of wisdom. Go ahead. Get the fuck off my stream, Lou. You're done. We don't tolerate Catholics around here. No, I'm just kidding.
Can I have one more final question?
It was a joke. Lou, go ahead. Words of wisdom. Let's hear. If you mention my traps, though, you're gone for good.
Well,
yeah, that's what I thought.
Finish the sentence.
Go ahead.
You'll learn you have weak traps in.
All right. Thanks for the questions, Lou. All right, Jay Ford, you're up next. Are you there?
Mic check.
You're a little bit loud. So
okay, I'll try to stay with. Is that better?
That's good. Yeah, that's good right there. So go ahead with your questions.
All right. Good evening, panelists. Christ is risen. Question for Spirit Man.
Yes,
are you aware that a lot of the forms of Christian theology that you purport have been annihilated by writings in the first 100 years of the Christian church? And to go deeper, are you aware that the tradition of understanding that was passed down to the Christians by the prophets and the priesthood would also deny your interpretation?
Yeah. So what I understand so far, like, guys, think of it this way. If this logic is truly universal, that means every mode of belief that has truth has it. So that means everything for the last 3,000 years that has been written down beyond oral tradition is technically going to be in this. So what's being asked of me right now is if this really is the true universal logic, the true living spirit of Jesus Christ, or the essence of what he was trying to talk about is the essence of the Father and the Spirit, you're basically asking me to sum up 3,000 years of particularity, and I can't do it. I can't read the Quran. I can't read them all at the same time.
Yeah, so but we reject that your universal logic even exists. We reject it categorically.
Well, how do you love your enemies?
Because it's not logical. We reject your universal logic because it's not confined by the laws of logic. That's why we reject it. It's absurd.
Well, the essential logic of spirit, though, you can't reject. There has to be logic in the Bible, or else you can't reason through it for yourself.
Even the spiritualism that we embrace is confined by the laws of logic, or it would be fucking coherent.
That's right. So that's why logic is foundational to everything, guys, even spiritual reason.
But you said your worldview can be incoherent, though. You just said many times you said you have a worldview that permits incoherency. But now you're appealing to coherency after Andrew just said that.
The moment of falsity, yeah, that's what falsity is incoherence, irrationality. So that's the moment. That's its moment. That's the second moment of the logic, right? So if you listen to what I'm saying,
that makes no sense.
This is
the 2 hour and 53 moment of incoherency.
It seems that way because the logic is abstract in your minds. But if I got a chance to explain it, maybe it would make more sense. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to be open. I'm willing to do the Savaya thing. I'm willing to do the Savaya thing and say maybe I'm wrong. And I'm willing to be corrected. But to answer you, Ford, I would say, for me, what clicked, at least in the Hegelian version of it, is when Hegel started talking about scholasticism. Like, he calls himself a Christian. I'm like, okay, I guess Muslims aren't going to like him and all this stuff. But what he's saying is way more the true Christian loving spirit, where you don't just tolerate your enemy, you actually love them and understand them. That makes sense to me now. And it became true when I studied Christian history, at least through Hegel's version, that when he talks about scholasticism, he says that Christianity went wrong. And I'm like, what are you talking about, Hegel? That was the best time of Christianity. And the way he explained it, it makes so much sense now, because he said, the true Christian spirit doesn't make God a perpetual beyond that you can't know. And he said, that's what scholasticism did. And I was like, yeah, but why is it important to know God? Like, why is it important to know God? Why can't we just read the Bible and just have it in faith? And he says, because then in your faith, your ignorance causes you to sin against your own will. The only way to truly get out of sin is to know how. And that means transcending just faith and determining it.
No, that's nonsense.
So
Why
he
do
said
you?
that
Why,
Scholastic kept it in faith, which is what
why do you
Kennedy-
need? So let me ask you a question. Was it a sin? Was it a sin for Adam and Eve to eat of the fruit?
Well, it created sin, separation. But sin just
was it a
missing the
sin
mark,
for them
right?
to do it in the first place?
Say again?
Was it a sin for them to do it in the first place?
That's a great question.
Oh well,
I haven't actually thought of that. That's great.
Wait, because the logical implication there is what if it was a sin for them to do it in the first place, and they didn't know sin, then the entirety of what you just said collapses on its face. So I'm going to ask you one more time: was it a sin for them to go against the wishes of God and eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil?
Well, the question is, if the serpent wasn't there, could they have made that
question
choice?
is very simple. One more time: was it a sin for Adam and Eve to eat of the fruit of the knowledge, or I'm sorry, to eat of the fruit that had the knowledge of good and evil?
And God said, "Don't eat of the tree," right?
Yeah.
Explicitly.
Yeah.
He said that explicitly. So they did explicitly go against God, right? Of their own will, not the serpent's will, their own will.
Their own will.
Then it was sin.
Then
That's
it was a sin, but they didn't have knowledge yet that was evil, right?
Well, that's why I was trying to clarify. Is if you're going to go from that definition, then it's not. Do you see how you can get both at once?
Yeah,
It depends on how you're defining that.
Because within your coherent worldview, there's no coherence, and that's.
I hope other people caught what I just said, because he's going to both sides of the dialectic.
I think people do realize what you just said.
So I'll ask you. I'll ask you. Do you think they were sinful?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Well, then I guess we agree. Can anybody disagree?
Okay, but wait. Then let's go back to your previous point, which is that if you don't have the knowledge of sin, it's not a sin. That's what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why the serpent.
They didn't have knowledge that it was a sin, only that they were disobeying. They didn't know sin. They didn't have the knowledge because sin is evil. They didn't even have knowledge.
Remember, sin means missing the mark.
No, sin is evil. You're saying sin's not evil?
It leads to evil, but sin as its pure essence is just missing the mark. So if God has the truth...
How do you determine evil?
Because one-sidedness is based off of the separation moment. But if you don't have the separation moment yet, you don't have that kind of knowledge to make that decision.
The separation moment is insane.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, I think
Can I just finish it? Okay, I won't finish it then. But I hope that makes sense to somebody.
Let's give Jay Ford another follow-up, and then we'll move on.
Well, I suppose my first initial follow-up to that is just like, do you think salvation is dependent on the knowledge that you've gained over this life? Or do you think that it's dependent for you to have knowledge in order to be saved? But that's sort of for later. I'm going to actually jump off here real fast. I just have another question. And this question is to any panelist. Can any of you squat 220 below parallel?
15 times.
Oh, that's very nice. But I'm just saying, like, you guys are.
I can squat to a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, hey, that's where it's at.
Spirit Man, I have one question. Do you follow your own will?
Do I follow my own will? How are you defining my own?
What
so
you
my
want to do,
stuff?
what you want to
Like
do, what you do, what you want to do, what you want to pursue. Do you follow that as your guiding principle?
Well, that's you're forced to. That's called caprice. But I'm trying to achieve genuine freedom, which means that what you just described was no. I don't think that's the truth. I think caprice can lead you to falsity. So that's to answer your question quickly. But abstract freedom, what you just talked about as freedom, is not real freedom. That's in opposition to necessity or the law, divine law.
Do you follow your own will?
We all follow our own will, but not necessarily our own reason. So the reasoning that you're trying to get to, God's reasoning, is the opposition to our abstract reasoning. So when you are aligned with that reason, that logic of
you make Jordan Peterson sound like Elmo.
Then if you don't align with God's thought, then yeah, you're gonna sin because you're following your ignorant freedom.
Elmo says you're ignorant.
So I hope that's clear to you. I think I'm pretty clear.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So, Jay Ford, any other follow-up questions?
No follow-up questions, but I do have parting wisdom, I suppose.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So, 1 Corinthians 3:18 through 20. Let no one deceive himself. If any of you thinks that he is wise in this age, he should become a fool, so that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight. As it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows that the thoughts of the wise are futile. Thank you.
Yeah, that's basically what I just said. But did I even answer?
No. Your
Oh, go
whole
ahead,
entire argument was
Thank
the
you for the
pursuit
call in, Jay Ford. We appreciate
was the
that.
pursuit of wisdom through the worldly knowledge. That's your whole worldview.
No, you're
it's basically
misinterpreting me.
what he
That's a
just
great.
said,
That's a
Jim
great
Bob. Come on.
clarification. That's a great clarification.
It's basically what he just said. I mean, you could just summarize the whole thing into Corinthian. Come on, man.
Okay, let me finish. Oh no, you
Are
misinterpreted
you
what
gonna,
I
are you gonna
said.
ever get to the point where you have a good faith answer to anything you say?
You said the scientific method can produce these metaphysical truths and ground them. And you said all this. You pursue the world. Your outcome of your worldview is worldly, is based in the world as an outcome, right? You seek wisdom, you gain it from the world.
No, so what you're doing is you're taking your definition of science and not understanding my definition. I'm saying you're still talking about finite science for some reason. I've already told you redefine it as infinite science.
You haven't you haven't established that there's any other science than the scientific method that's based in the natural world that we interact with.
So the worldly knowledge that you think I'm saying is the wisdom isn't. So when we look at the world, we're actually trying to find the supersensuous
natural
universe.
theology.
So let's say again.
Theology through nature.
If you want to stay in religious consciousness, yeah. But I'm saying that we can transcend religious consciousness and get to the truth.
Through the tree. Through a tree.
Transcend religious consciousness?
Yes, because the fulfillment, remember, we're not negating religious consciousness. We're not canceling it. That's the mistake you're about to make. I have a funny feeling. What I'm saying is,
I have a funny feeling I'm about to make that mistake too.
yeah, okay. It's hard because if you don't understand sublation,
that's going to have to be a conversation for another day because we've got super chats we've got to get to. Reminder to everybody, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any last minute super chat questions you want to ask, or if you want to talk some shit to any of the panelists except for myself, send in a super chat. It will get read on stream.
Make sure you send in the shit talking for Zen, especially.
Yeah,
for
but
Zen.
I would like to emphasize not to do that. If anybody sends a super chat shit talking me, you're banned from the chat permanently, and I'm the final judge of that. I don't care if it's for $100. You're still banned. All right. So first of the super chats.
I'll bring you back. I'll bring you back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You tell yourself that. We've got some Jim Bob membership funds. Jim Throbs membership fund. He illiterate no globe likes his George hung not folded. Same. Bench of Heroes gym membership fund. Okay, he's saying I have weak traps or something. Yeah, fuck off. This is feeling a little wee woo. Not gonna lie, from Jay Ford. Question from Pano to Spirit Man: did you create yourself?
In your infinite self, yes, but in your finite self, no.
Okay.
Remember, your infinite self is spirit, so it just makes sense. God created you in spirit.
Okay. Another question from Pano, or is it? I don't know if it's a question. God destroyed death himself by himself, dying on the cross. It's done. That's the true gospel in a nutshell. No need to engage in this self-negating dialectic.
Well, that's the thing is that when you negate yourself, if you do it abstractly in opposition, in one-sidedness, yeah, that's the wrong way. That's not the ideal life. The ideal death that Jesus had was sublation. So he's saying that when you die a physical death, that's not real death. That's just particular death, the false death. So when you realize that, you gain eternal life. So that's just universal logic 101.
Yeah, but through what?
Just go ahead.
Realizing
Through what? What do you gain eternal life through? Do you gain it through you becoming a god?
You get it through understanding spirit in sensuous form, which is what Jesus was pointing the way to.
No, what did Jesus say you got eternal life through? One thing. What did he say it was?
The way, the truth, and the life.
What did he say it was?
Through him being the way, the truth, and the life.
No. That's not what he said that salvation was. He said only through me.
And that's the mistake you're making as an abstract Christian, in my opinion.
You mean as somebody who actually read the Bible, unlike somebody who has not?
Abstract is not reading
Plenty
the
of people
Bible.
read the Bible, and they do terrible things, man. So reading the Bible isn't enough. Your interpretation
And
of the
I'm
Bible.
happy to go over all those perceived terrible things you think happen.
Who's being more abstract right now, Andrew or you?
Me now. I'm actually negating him, so sorry about that. But I'm just trying to say that I think interpreting the Bible is really important, not just reading it. And I think that if you have a universal logic in that higher spirit, then you can grasp the essence of what it's trying to say.
So your interpretation is the proper one?
I'm saying that it's a little bit more coherent once you understand past these ordinary abstract words that we use and grasp the living nature of the words, the real power of the word. I guess that's what the word is. That makes sense now. That's the real power of the word, the living word.
So hey, who was the way, the truth, and the light? Who was that?
Anybody that grasps spirit, but
no,
Jesus.
Who was it? Who said they were the way, the truth, and the light?
Oh, there's plenty of people in history, but
no,
Jesus said it.
Who in the Bible said, "I'm the way, the truth,
and
and
the Bible
the light"?
Is Jesus.
Oh, it was Jesus. So the way of the truth and the light is through who?
It's through Jesus Christ.
No, it's through Jesus Christ. Okay.
Okay, next is Jay Ford. You can't just make nonsense up and expect people to buy it wholesale. Gym membership fund, thank you for that. Also, Savaya is just vibing, man. Yeah, I kind of noticed that too. Savaya is over here vibing, but I think he's made it. He's laid a charge against
we don't want you to hurt yourself.
Savaya, you have the gift, a God-given gift of patience.
But there has been a charge made against, I believe, the left side of the panel. So if you guys want to respond to that first sentence there. No, you don't have to. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead if you want to.
Me?
Yeah, if you want to respond, you can. You don't have to though. It's okay.
You can't just make up nonsense and expect people to buy also. So you're talking to me, right?
I would imagine.
How did he know?
Because it's hard, guys, because there's two ways to interpret nonsense, right? One is that I really don't know what I'm talking about and it's just coming off as incoherent babble. Or two, I actually do have the truth and you're confused and you're projecting your confusion onto me, which is what I actually think is happening. Because the words I'm using look ordinary to you guys, but the way I'm using them, it's not familiar enough for you to grasp into. So I actually I might have the truth, but because you're abstract in your sinful nature, that you can't get into it. So what I have to do is like, be careful. It's also partly my fault because I'm not doing it properly either. So we're actually having interdynamic because I'm finite.
Abstraction is sinful?
If you do it the wrong way, yeah. But there's a right way to do abstraction too, which is
Let me guess. It's in your app. That's the right way to do it. Is download your app and then get the elixir. Get the elixir.
I'm trying to make it wise, guys. It's true, but you guys are actually really helping me improve my argument very, very.
No. You are full of shit, and we love you, but you're totally full of shit, and you have to abandon this stuff.
Okay.
It's just nonsense. It's nonsense.
Before we move on, Spirit Man, just for the spirit of this next question, can you just put your hands up like this?
Oh, what are you gonna do to me?
What am I gonna do to you? You're on your
Is it good? Are you loving me or are you gonna hurt me? What are you gonna do?
No, it's just for the spirit of the next question. Can you name 5 prophets in the Old Testament without Googling it?
Oh, just my one hand? 5 prophets?
No. You don't keep the hands where I can see them.
Oh, so I'm not typing. Oh, okay. So Moses, right? Do we consider Jesus a prophet in the Bible?
The other guy. You know him.
Abraham, Moses, Noah, and one more would be. Would we consider like Paul, the Pope, to be a prophet?
Paul is New Testament.
Yeah, that's New Testament though. But would we consider him a prophet?
Well, you said Old Testament.
You said Old Testament? Oh, Old Testament. Another Old Testament one. I would say Isaiah. Does that?
Okay, but I would challenge you on your Jesus one because he is
okay,
referenced.
So one more on top of that. I'm doing pretty good, guys.
You got 4. I'll give you 4.
One more that comes off the top of my head. I would say.
We see your magician trick. Keep those hands up. Keep those fucking hands up. We see the magician fucking trick.
You guys got to give me some credit. I've read the vid. I've been reading so much stuff, guys. Like, I'm pretty happy that I even got that far. But I would say if I had enough time to think about it, I probably could think of a 5th one. I'll just say, yeah, I'm not perfect in my Christian knowledge, but I hope I'm giving the impression that I'm willing to try. Because if you don't have the faith, you can't try, right? So that's why you have to start with faith. But yeah, in good faith, I'm really trying to get there.
It's not sola fide. Listen, I'm telling you, do me a favor. Can you make me this promise and I'll make you one? I'm going to go review all of your shit on your channel. I really will. I'll listen to not every video, but a good majority of them. Will you go to an Orthodox church and do a divine liturgy just once? Just once in exchange for me 10 videos. I'll give you 10 videos.
I mean, I feel like I'm already doing it. I mean, the thing is,
you're not doing it.
No, you're not.
Well, hold on, let me stop. Let me stop for a second and get you to clarify. What do you mean by this divine? What is that exactly?
Just
is that like a
to an Orthodox church to a liturgy once
on a Sunday.
That's it.
On a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Look
on a
up-
Sunday
look up
morning.
Is that a repeated reading or what is it?
Who cares what it is? Just go do it one time.
Because think about it, guys. If I make this promise,
there's no
to
sacraments. There's no nothing. There's no
negate
baptism.
negate all the knowledge you have. It's in line with your worldview.
Well, I have to get into the world to get that knowledge, but because guys, I just have so much. Like, if I have to go and reach out to everybody in the true spirit, that means if somebody in Quran says you have to read the whole Quran and the Buddha and the Veda,
you reached out to me. You reached out to me, and I responded. So I'm asking you to do this thing for me.
Well, I read the Bible and Hegel and all this stuff.
To do this one thing
I
for me. Will you go to an Orthodox church, or is your skin going to burst into flame?
I'm willing to go to all churches.
So you're going to go to an Orthodox church and do a liturgy once?
If you invite me to a session, I will definitely try and make time for that for sure.
No, I'm not. Well, I mean, I can't invite
you. If you point me somewhere, I'll follow your lead.
You would just Google like Orthodox church near me. Make sure it's Eastern Orthodox, and just
might
look up when they're
Eastern Orthodox. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. What's Eastern Orthodox exactly? What do Eastern Orthodoxes believe in the Christian word?
Not the things you believe in.
That's what.
Just 5 sentences. What would you sum it up as?
Man, that's.
So a summation would be difficult. But I gave you the
Nicene.
But wait, I gave you the Nicene Creed, which should get you on the right track. And also, I don't speak for the Orthodox Church. There are people, neither does Zen, and neither does anybody else here. There are people who are great representatives who I could put you in touch with, who could help you to understand that knowledge.
100% open to chat with them.
I think that's a fair offer. He'll watch 10 of your videos. You go to a local Orthodox church and attend a divine liturgy on a Sunday. And
just one. I could probably
just one.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
One. Stay and talk to the priest. Stay for coffee hour. I mean, whatever.
Oh, I have to physically be present. I could probably make that happen if it's in my city. But if it's like far away from the floor,
look up
in your city. I promise, in your city, there.
If you can find somebody in my city, then I'll go there. Yeah, if you can do that.
Promise, you can DM me on Twitter, and I'll link you up.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a fair trade. Jay Ford, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me.
I invite this guy, the quiet guy, too.
Yeah. Savaya.
What is love?
Maybe don't hurt.
Well, not that fucking guy. No, I'm kidding.
So he's saying he'd invite you to an Orthodox liturgy. I think everybody could benefit from going to one of those. So
I want to say one thing quickly, just while we're talking. And it might, to people who are watching this, it might look like, we're the ones that are massively talking and Savaya's kind of out. But the reality is the opposite. Savaya is actually, I think, higher than us, and we're trapped in particularities in some weird way. So I just want to say that there's actually something profound happening. And I really appreciate you being here, Savaya, because you could be in many other places while we're squabbling here. But I appreciate your patience and dealing with us while we're figuring this stuff out.
Thank you, Savaya, for being elevated above. Yeah. The debate that you came to do. Thank you so much for that.
He doesn't debate in this style. If we had his style, he could.
I mean, what style does he debate in? The style of not saying fucking anything? What is the style here? What are you talking about, man?
He's more sublative, you could say. It's much more less abstract.
Do I need to learn telepathy? Like, what's the...
It's a different kind of style, but I just wanted to throw out a shout out there because you're a champion to me, Savaya. People are sort of railing on both of us, but don't give in to the abstraction. It is really fun being here, you guys. You have an excellent channel, so I'm having fun. So thanks for this.
So, Spirit Man, you talked about coming to several different universals: truth, logic, and spirit. Where do these universals come from? How did they get there?
Now, this is where most Hegelians don't follow me. But I think this is the true interpretation, and Christians love it because it gets to what more the Bible says. The universals don't come from anywhere but themselves. So they have to think and ground themselves. That's why God doesn't need anything outside.
A universal can think?
Itself.
Can a universal think?
A universal, yes, but not the way that we do. It has an infinite kind of thinking, where its thinking is immediate perfection, where it creates...
What does the Bible say again?
Go ahead.
Just come on, man. What do you mean what the Bible says? You don't know what the Bible says. You admitted you don't know what the Bible says.
Yeah, you got to stop referencing.
The stuff that I've interpreted the Bible is that
the abstraction, and you're like, well, yes, these are abstract. We know they're abstractions. That's why he's asking you in the abstract.
Because like when I'm saying these words, you guys are still interpreting them in an abstract way, which is why you can try and pin me in logical contradictions. But the Bible's not really like that. Like the Bible says that God doesn't need anything outside of itself.
God is a being. You're saying truth, logic think themselves into existence.
Human being.
Yeah, no. You said truth, logic, spirit think themselves into existence, right?
Yeah.
So they're independent of a being. It's just how does truth as an it think itself into being if truth itself has nothing to do with like being from your worldview? I believe truth is a person, is a God, is a person. It's not an it. So when he says how did they come to be, you say, well, they think themselves into existence. Well, thinking yourself into existence requires the precondition of truth and logic.
Okay, exactly. So that's brilliant.
Yeah. So discard that.
Right.
And
so when you say personality too, the way I thought you were using it, so we're just clarifying now. All sublation, all like living spirit is always just clarification to the good. So what just got clarified is that the way you use the word personality, I thought you were using it just to mean gendered.
No,
but you actually mean
person.
Being.
Yeah, person.
Yeah. And we agree 100%. So the idea that develops from its own being is a personality. But it's not the kind of personality that we think we're finite, we're sinful personalities. This kind of personality is the universal kind. When you're aligned with the good and the spirit, that's the kind that you get. But in terms of like truth being outside of its own being, it's not. That's why it has to think its own self. It's like a self-referential loop that it's like, here's the question, here's the paradox. It's like God begins itself and it doesn't begin itself. God always existed, but also determined itself. How's that possible?
How's it possible for God to be an it?
Well, it's an it that has a personality. So
it's not. So
it's in your definition. It's not an it. So yeah, if we go by your definition of personality, then it's not an it anymore.
No, person, not personality. Person.
Well, a person has space time. God doesn't have space time. So Jesus does. So Jesus
can be God.
Person.
You can exist outside of space time.
Yeah, so God does exist outside of space-time.
No, well, wait. Presuppositions require a space and a time, and you think we can exist outside of presupposition, outside of space and time, because you think we can be gods. So I don't really understand this line here.
Well, we're not talking about self-deification in sinful knowledge. We're talking about spirit.
Think God is a person.
So define person. So if you mean space-time, unless you mean Jesus,
somebody who has the potential to exist outside of space-time. I'll just say that as my definition of a person.
It's an individual. So I guess that's true.
Okay.
But it's a universal individual, which is a contradiction, right? So if you really grasp what I'm saying, a universal person.
How is it a contradiction?
Because it's not it's not like me and you.
Yeah, God, the person of God.
Yeah. Individual person.
You're getting somewhere. The Trinitarian God transcends absolutes and universals and particulars. Your iteration of God as an it does not transcend universals and particulars.
Why not? That's just the individual.
What?
Yeah, but you just said
individual.
You said it's an it. You said it's an it. But
the way I was using it, I thought you meant it in a more narrow sense, but you mean it in a more broad sense. So now we actually agree. We just
individuals exist outside of space-time.
Well, what kind of individuals are you talking about?
All individuals, all kinds. No, there's no kinds of individuals I can think of that I wouldn't flop. Also, all individuals. Can all individuals potentially exist outside of space-time in your paradigm?
Can all individuals or persons? Because those are two different.
Both either.
I would say individuals, yes. Persons, no.
Okay, so individuals being me, could I exist outside of space-time?
As an individual, you already do, but you don't realize it yet. Oh, hold on. When you say you mean your finite self. So I guess technically, it's a yes and no answer because spirit is timeless inside of you.
Everything's a contradiction. Being. Yes means no, no means yes, up means down, down means left, left means right, up means square.
Okay, we should move on, Zen. No. Yeah.
I
keep Jim Bob here all night. We got to move through him quick.
Yeah.
Spirit. I'll say one thing. I'll say one thing to kind of leave it on a positive note.
No, we got to move forward, man. We got to move through the supers. Sorry to cut you off. We have to.
So it's not conflating them. That's how you think of spirit.
Got to move through.
Okay. So sounds like Spirit Man has gotten into some alchemy books. Yes or no? Have you? Yes or no? No. Have you?
Alchemy books. In the past, yes. Currently, not really.
Okay. Cool. totally worth staying up for. High five, Spirit Man. Everybody do the this emoji thing for Casey Bear 7 in the chat. We will pay our homage to her because she's a good long time member and consistent super
she's
chatter.
cheating on Vosh. She's cheating on Vosh for Spirit.
Yeah, apparently it's like Vosh's e-wife or something.
You dirty Casey girl. You
everyone,
dirty
Casey Bear 7, do this emoji thing in the chat, whatever it is, those two hands that go up. Karma's Real says, God doesn't need to eat food. I don't know what that's referencing, but
okay. Yeah, it's not sensuous. You're exactly right.
I really enjoyed this. Thanks all. I enjoyed this too. It's kind of dragging on at this point, but but I enjoyed it as well. Here's an idea. You guys need to negate what you know, stop referencing the same 4 Bible passages you've read, and get some religion. I don't know if that's referencing the left side. I think it is, but I don't know. King Cash YT says, Savaya's voice makes me want to fall asleep.
It makes me want to love.
I tend to agree. Well, Emmanuel sends 100 pesos, which equals what?
26 cents.
26 cents. Yeah, that's what I thought too. 26 cents. Thank you for your quarter and a penny. Well, Emmanuel. Spirit Man, you made a lot of claims like the true X, the real X, and to do X right. Consider the possibility that your worldview doesn't justify those claims, even if the claims were right.
I just didn't get enough time, guys. Just like what he said, you can't sum the Christian Bible up in 2 sentences or Christian Eastern Orthodoxy. It's the same with me. It's like it just takes more time, and it's because our symbols have to align, and that's what we're doing.
You had 3 hours, dude.
Well, I'll tell you guys something. Just to get to where I am, in my understanding, took me 3,100 hours on top of 20 years.
What a waste of your time. It's incoherent.
I think it's the real spirit, guys. I really do, but it takes some time.
Your standard for what is true, what is the right way to do things, leads us down a road to reject truth existing and knowledge of truth. So it's over.
Existence itself, even.
Yeah, existence itself.
Well, not really. I think what's actually happening here is that we have 2 symbology sets, and yours are a little bit more abstract, and I'm coming with something a little bit more.
Ours is coherent.
Yours is actually more abstract. Yours is actually more abstract.
Because I'm not able to finish. So, for instance, if you try and get to the truth, that means that you have to question your presuppositions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a definitional. We have to accept that, right? So to get to truth, if we just extrapolate that, if we just continue that logic, then the truth means there's no assumptions in any of the knowledge that's absolutely true. Now, the question is, can we get to absolute truth? That's up in the air. But can we get closer? That means we have to keep questioning more and more presuppositions. And I'm saying that the place that we can begin that is the most presuppositionless that we can get as finite beings is just to negate all the knowledge we think we have.
No. Fear God. Fear God is the absolute starting point.
Well, you're right. But what that means logically, in the universal logic, what that means is, at first, this universal stuff has to come up from outside of you. But it's actually already inside of you. So that's how you reconnect.
Another contradiction that's just perfectly okay.
It's how spirit exists, guys. Because how can Jesus always be in you to connect with you?
Well, who cares? We're using universal logic.
God is always
trying to bind everything.
And it's always inside of you. That's why you're in the image of God. That's how you interpret that passage.
Spirit Man, it's not that you can't get to it.
Rules of logic, and then you say this universal logic is not bound by logic. So anytime you try to make a claim against us, you use actual logic, and then anytime we press you on yours, you use this brand new logic where contradictions are fine. It's bizarre.
You can use it, but you have to use it in the living way. So I am using the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of exclusion middle.
It's not, Spirit Man. It's not that you can't. It's not that you can't get to a place. Is that you can't even start. That's what we're pointing out. That your starting presuppositions and assumptions are incoherent. There's your starting points off. So I invite you. Right. I've been very aggressive. It's nothing against you, person. It's that you have to start to look in the mirror and go, are my fundamental starting points coherent? Not is my conclusion coherent, right?
Here, I'll try and say this because you're right. You know something. The problem with logic that we have today is that logic is itself illogical. So if you had to explain,
I'm sorry, we can't do this. We can't do this.
You have to explain to me, Jim Bob, where did those logical principles come from? You say Aristotle, but where did Aristotle get them from? That's the contradiction you're going to get.
I'm sorry. We can't. Well, this will have to continue.
Yeah, I agree. We got to get through the supers. We got to let poor Jim Bob get to sleep. For God's sakes, he's been up forever doing this with us.
What's the next one? It's not that crazy for Spirit Man to say we should reject everything we've ever been told as his first law of logic, especially with the last few years.
Thank you, sir.
I get the
Okay.
rhetoric of it. It's rhetorical. It's rhetoric. It's not an actual thing. He's just saying the absurdity of the last few years. Reject things you might think you know from the world. But I don't think he's in any way endorsing that your worldview can just be contradictory and self-refuting.
Totally agree. I think that what he's saying here is exactly that. And he's just saying, like, look, due to the madness of the world, it's perfectly fine to reject a lot of the presuppositions that you might have held just 2 years ago about government and the way that the world works. But we're talking about a fundamental logical basis. And here is where we have split the paradigm, and your entire worldview is completely incoherent.
Can I give you to you guys? But can I give you? I'll try and draw it. I'll try and do something different. So imagine there's two worlds, okay, and whether they exist or not.
Don't do the T-jump two worlds.
I'm not going to make an illustration. I'm just trying to make an illustration. So imagine that there's a supersensuous perfect world of God, where God's reason is perfect in itself, and then there's our sensuous finite world. All the knowledge you get in this world is approximating this world, but you're doing it in a kind of sloppy way, let's say, me included. So what you have to do to get back to this world of logic is you have to cancel everything in this world so that you get back to, so you can like get back to this world in the first place. If you can connect back to this world in the first place, then while you are in this world, you can be in the world, but not of it, because you're of this other world. This world.
Fair enough. Can we do that with a button?
With a button?
Yeah. Just
we're making an app to try and make it easier.
No, I mean, yeah. So we just push the button and we're back from this world to that one.
Well, you have to determine it for yourself. But the first thing is you have to challenge
but let's just say, hypothetically, there was a button that did that. Do you think we should push the button?
And get back to divine knowledge? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sorry. I think we should experience I think we should experience the free will of doing it for ourselves. That's what I think we should do.
Crowley level. Follow your own will, right?
Okay, we got to move on.
No. So, I'm saying follow your own gift of will from God, but you want to do it in the destiny kind of way, not in the abstract caprice kind of way.
Okay, cool. So Casey Bear 7 asks, Spirit Man, what do you think about the Bible saying that masturbation is self-abuse and that we're advised not to do it?
So I don't know where in the Bible I actually thought that wasn't true, but that is actually a passage in the Bible. Like it actually says masturbation somewhere in the Bible, or does it use some kind of approximate language?
You're muted. BP up. You're muted.
It has the word that was used for it. Yes.
What is the actual word they use besides masturbation?
I'd have to pull it up.
Oh, you're not reading your Bible.
I think biblically it's spanking.
No. You asked what the root word was. There's no reason to think I would know what the root word would be that would...
The concept is there, though. It's a word concept fallacy.
Oh, so they actually use the word masturbation in the Bible? Like the actual word, the English translation, masturbation in the Bible?
No,
I don't remember that.
It's not.
Okay, so they do have the root word. So you should know that if it's in the Bible. Okay, so I would say that what masturbation represents is what was called the bad infinite. It's a repeating dead kind of logic where you don't reproduce. So in terms of biology, it's reproducing in a biological example.
And why are you pro LGBTQ? Why are you pro LGBTQ? That makes no fucking sense. Why would you be pro LGBTQ if it doesn't lead to procreation?
Because biological procreation isn't the true life. It's the metaphysical life that's coming through procreation, but it doesn't necessarily have to just be in those modes.
Wait, procreation is metaphysical?
Yeah, it's all everything that's rational in this world is the metaphysical logic coming through space-time from the supersensuous.
So when a horse impregnates the mare, so when the horse impregnates a mare, they're doing a metaphysical action?
No, it's both. Because they can be doing it of caprice or they can be doing it out of destiny. So it's a mix of creationism and Darwinian evolution. But what's being uncovered through Darwinian
a sexual act with someone you can't actually have sex with is rational to you in your worldview?
Say that again. What do you mean sex with
doing a sexual act, which is a perversion of sex, with a person or a thing or an animal that you can't actually have proper sex with? That's rational in your worldview.
No.
Okay.
Well, hold on. Like, let me.
No. We don't need it. We don't need it.
No, I'm saying with animals and a different species.
Sum it all up.
In a species, in terms of human beings.
I'm sorry.
I do think that should be love-based. I think with love-based, it's rational. It's self-recognition.
Oh, love-based, a love-based interaction with a cow.
Guys,
God damn.
Guys, cut it off. We're done. this stream has been crumbled like a cookie. All of our minds have been crumbled like a cookie. This was fun. I did enjoy it, but man, it's been 3.5 hours. We got to wrap it up. So for the last time, we're going to give everybody a chance to go around, shout yourselves out, tell everybody where they can find you. Savaya, we're going to start with you.
Twitch TV/Savaya21.
And Spirit Man?
Yeah, I guess you could just go to that Hegelians Who Want to Change the World Facebook group if you're interested in the culture and the wisdom and the universal logic that I'm trying to explain. The mystical types, the mystical Christians really gravitate to what I'm saying because you got that inside of yourself. But if you're interested more in the practical political side, go to the Worldwide Essential Workers app, WeWa. And if you're interested more in the elixir of life type stuff and doing that wisely, because you're right, Jim, there's a total unwise way. And I think we're kind of heading that way. So I think if you're interested in that, go to, I can't say the word, but if you go to the word plus the elixir of life, then it's on Facebook and you can find us there too. And I'm Spiritman23 on Twitch, but I haven't been streaming yet. So.
And Jim Bob, you're up.
Made by Jim Bob. You can find me. I do live streams every day at Made by Jim Bob on YouTube. I have an Instagram account, Made by Jim Bob. I use both of them to use humor, animation, comics, and just talking to people, open forum discussion style about all these things. I rail pretty much against certain worldviews, especially ones that start with the proposition that we can change the world, the revolutionary paradigm. I actually take joy in tearing that apart and shredding it into pieces. And with that, thank you, Savaya and Spiritman. Spiritman, you really did have a good spirit the whole time. I got to give it to you. You were just hit with hammers left and right, and you just smile, and you just take it like a champ.
Universal logic, guys. Wait till you experience it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be an experience. Thank you. And I would like to thank our opponents for coming on tonight. And thank you for reaching out to me. And again, big shout out to Jim Bob. Thank you for taking so much time out of your evening. And I'm not going to take any more. I'm Andrew Wilson with the Crucible, and we're out of here.
Peace.